What's up, Cerebral football fans? My name is Stephen Hyder. This is Gay City Sports Channel. All right, you guys have been hitting me up on Twitter for a while. You guys wanted me to talk a little bit about some of the movements that we've seen during free agency. So I want to start this conversation off by really talking about outside linebackers, what we would call off-ball overhangs, versus kind of these stacks. So stacked meaning, you're on the second level, off-ball backers. And kind of the hybrid nature of what I think we're about to see from Vic Fangio's system. I got a few things keyed up for us to watch, guys. But I want you to start off by remembering the role that Kyzir White had underneath Jonathan Gannon here in Philadelphia, which was, of course, a little bit of a bastardization of Vic Fangio's system. No doubt about it. But I do think that you'll see some of those roles reinvented again, right? So if you think about Kyzir White, the role he played with Jonathan Gannon, I'm going to define that for you guys in a second. Think about some of the names we're about to talk about today. So to begin with, what was that role? Kyzir White was predominantly what we call an off-ball stacked linebacker, okay? So he was mostly playing towards the weak side of things. Every now and then you would see him line up as kind of the Mike, but for the most part, he was the weak side backer inside of Gannon's system. But he was used in a very unique way. So you would see him stacked off-ball. You'd see him come up and challenge the A's and the B gaps, sometimes even as a C gap kind of defender. And then you'd also see him lined up as an overhang. Overhang being the same thing that you see from guys like, Josh Sweat, and the same things you see from Reddick and Nolan Smith and those guys, right? Like they use Kyzir White in a very specific way with Gannon's scheme. When I look at some of the things that we're seeing here, the first player that pops into my mind of what I saw during the offseason is this really low-key signing. That was probably one of the only really hyped people on Twitter when I saw the signing, because I'm like, I don't know the dude's a player. He's got to get on the field and show that to us. I know he had a really strong closing to the 2023 season. The last 6 games or so for the Saints, Zack Baun went off a little bit. The dude showed some pass rush ability. But what I was excited about is that everyone was hitting me up and like, Gate, is he off ball? Is this an overhang? And I'm like, I think he's a hybrid. I think what you are seeing is going to be Andrew Van Ginkel from Miami. Now you're taking this guy, Zack Baun, and you're bringing him in to the system here in Philadelphia. And I'm going to show you just a couple of things that I saw from kind of like what I saw here. So overhang, kind of like, go into the story. If you don't know who Andrew Van Ginkel was, guys, he was a off-ball stack linebacker that started getting some plays in overhang, right? They started using him as an overhang. He would come up, he'd play the A gaps, he would play those B gaps, he would overhang on the outside like Reddick and them, right? This was a very flexible, very, much a hybrid type player that Fangio got his hands on. Fangio made him into a bit of a player last year in Miami. So I want to queue up just so you guys can see kind of Andrew Van Ginkel here. I have this clip clued up here where it's going to show you him just kind of like playing as a, like an overhang here. I think this is the best way of just demonstrating it. So I'll queue it up for you guys to see and we'll watch it together. Hopefully we don't get dinged on YouTube because I'm going to stay in the frame. Technically, this is, this is not copyright. We should be safe with that, but you know how YouTube is, guys. It can be a little weird sometimes. So we're going to go Andrew Van Ginkel. I'm going to share the screen with you guys. Hopefully everybody can see it. Yep, you guys should be able to see it. I'm still on the side of the screen. All right. So I want you guys to watch this play right here with Van Ginkel. Quick, subtle movement by Van Ginkel gets himself kind of freed up here and then, makes this play on the quarterback. This is a guy that was mostly playing as an overhang in the NFL. Now I want you guys to think about this fact, guys. Last year, we had a really difficult time with booting. Quarterbacks that kept booting and moving the pocket. Go back to both of those Washington games and look what happened to us in those games. The way those quarterbacks kept extending the plays. And then, we got guys like slaying them, got out of position, and these major completions. We were hanging on by, the very skin of our teeth to win those games because of motion and movement and rolling the pocket, right? Booting the pocket. Dak got us last year on it. Something we didn't really expect because it's not really Dak's MO, but Dak was able to boot and move the pocket and create a little bit of freedom last year versus our defense. I want you to watch the way Van Ginkel here actually plays, and I'm going to get why we're showing Van Ginkel. But look at the way he actually plays someone booting the pocket. I'm going to fast forward this up, guys, a little bit. All right, so I want you to watch him against Dallas. This is Dak Prescott trying to boot. There he is on the outside, right? See Dak booting? Look at him stay home, guys. And he gets his hands up, creates an incompletion. All right. When I saw the Zack Baun signing, I was like, okay, they're cooking a little bit. Like they're starting to cook with gas a little bit here. Like this is the type of player I like from a hybrid perspective because he's not easy to define. They could use him as an overhang purely. They could use him as a stacked off ball, linebacker purely. But I think if you look at Vic Fangio, what he did with Andrew Von Ginkel, then I think you can kind of see maybe a little bit of a blueprint for a guy like Zack Baun. But I think it goes deeper than that, guys. Let's talk about the roster for 1 second. Let's divide up some of these players, and let's think for a second about the type of athletes they're putting on the roster right now, right? Haason Reddick, Bryce Huff. Those are no-brainers, right? Those are those very similar type body styles, all that. You could even go to Josh Sweat, but I'm going to keep him separate from the conversation right now. But Josh Sweat was an outside linebacker in college. Like this was a guy who's not unfamiliar with standing up. He's bigger, he's stronger in the NFL. He's a guy that probably fits more in kind of that wide 9 type thing. I think that's where you could really use Josh Sweat's speed to his advantage is off a wide 9 type system. Okay, so we go past Haason Reddick. We get past Bryce Huff. Who's up next, guys? Nolan Smith. Look at the athletes. Look at the body types that we're talking about. Look at the experience of guys like Nolan Smith could play, he could definitely play stacked off ball. I'm not saying that's what the Eagles are going to do with him, but he has the movement ability to do that, right? Haason Reddick was a stacked off-ball linebacker at one point, and Bryce Huff also has that kind of ability within his frame to do that type of thing. One of the under-the-radar kind of signings that happened, kind of when we got to this, okay, they didn't retain this guy, didn't give him a futures contract. He's now available for other teams to negotiate with. Julian Okwara. Think of the body type. Think of the type of player you got there in Julian Okwara, right? Brandon Smith. Same kind of, thing. Could play stat, could play off-ball. Probably going to be viewed in Philly, I would assume, my assumption here is as an overhang. He's going to compete as an overhang on the bottom end of the roster, right? And then you get to a guy like Patrick Johnson, right? Same kind of ordeal. He's a guy that could play stacked. He could play off-ball. Has not done that in the NFL. Really didn't do that much in college, but has the frame, has the body type to where he could do it. But he's been an overhang, right? He's been a stand-up kind of overhang in college and in the NFL, if you will. And then I think you got these type of 3 guys in particular, these type of ends that are a little different. They're a little different from all the guys we just talked about, right? So you got Josh Sweat, you got Terrell Lewis, and you got Teron Jackson. I would probably make the argument that while it's not the strong suit of a Terrell Lewis, it's not the strong suit of a Josh Sweat to stand up, they have the underlying athleticism to do so. Teron Jackson, I think that's a little bit out of his element, guys. I think it's a little out of his depth. And then the 4th guy in this, kind of discussion would be Brandon Graham, but he's a hybrid player in a different way. I think he's going to offer you more inside-outside versatility along the defensive line. So I think he's a little bit separate of a conversation. Which brings us to the conversation around Zack Baun. One of these signings that people I think are just kind of forgetting about. And I want to go through some of his film, guys. I want to show you a few things that stood out to me about Zack Baun's film. First thing I want to do is I'm going to show you this young man in coverage and what he did, because I think that some of it, this signing in particular, I think it's a little underrated. I think people are kind of sleeping on just how good of a signing this was for the Eagles. And this he's a ball player, man. Like, I think we got a guy that's not going to be like a starting caliber guy, I don't think, but I think as a rotational kind of player in here, he's interesting. He brings a little interest to this Vic Fangio type system that we're going to see. So I'm going to share the screen, guys. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to show you Zack Baun. All right. All right, here we go, guys. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play it. Hopefully it's showing everything to you guys. You guys can see and I can see everything. I'm going to go ahead and maximize the screen to make it a little bigger for you. All right. So Zack Baun, guys, if you look down towards like kind of the bottom of the screen, he's number 53. You can see there's an outside corner that's just above the score. Zack Baun is the next guy up there on the 2nd level, guys. That's Zack Baun. He's playing obviously stacked off ball. You can see some of the Kaiser White nature to this, to where we would put Kaiser White to match and carry for specific yardage on slot receivers. Watch Zack Baun play in space, okay? He's not really going to carry as much. He's going to play in space in this one, but it's important to see this. All right, watch him drop back, get those hips right, drop back, get under that throw, boom, interception. The first of his career. This young man, I'm telling you, there's something to this guy. I'm going to show you him playing up in the B gap now, right? So this is like B, C gap kind of stuff. He's going to come up on the line of scrimmage and he's going to play. All right, so if you look down, look towards the bottom of your screen again, guys, you'll see there's number 32. There's an edge kind of lined up there. Then you see Zack Baun is kind of that next guy in that stack. So he's kind of the guy that's back behind 96 and to like the, I guess, would be the left of 32 here. You're going to see him kind of come up and come into that B zone, right? Kind of playing off-ball stack. Watch how he gets pressure from this, this particular play. Watch him. Boop. Comes right in. Sticks with it. Keeps his heads up. That's called stacking and shedding that block, guys. He stacked it. He shed it. He got to the quarterback, right? Cheap kind of play, no doubt about it. But I know what you're saying, Gate. Show me him as an overhang. What can he do as an overhang? Well, I'm going to show you him playing a little bit outside. So if you look here, I wouldn't call this truly an overhang because he's outside the overhang, but he's going to show you the fluidity in the hips to do it. Look to the bottom of your screen, guys. He's outside of 96. He's just kind of like, it looks like that's Pitts, that he's inside of Pitts here. Watch him bend.
Thank you for making a family-friendly Pam.
Right?
It is Ritter trying to get around the edge. Look, no chance this time. Zack Baun was working for him.
I love the fact that young man kept to his run responsibilities and set the edge. And now I'm going to give you purely as an overhang. Minute and 34. We're going to go in here. We're going to watch him purely as an overhang. So bottom of your screen, kind of inside your wide receiver here, who's a little bit tight to the formation. You're going to see him kind of come off this edge and set this edge and really get around the corner here. I really like this young man's abilities. He's very athletic.
Back on pace.
Right, watch him.
Lions perfect on third down.
That was Penny School that
he's going to change right here. Zack Baun gets there for the
You guys see that dip? Let me show you that again. Watch this dip, man. This dip is to be reckoned with, man. Watch that bend. Watch that dip. Watch this again.
On pace. Lions perfect on third down thus far.
Right under School.
Going to change right here. Zack Baun gets.
This is a better signing than it's being given credit for, man. This kid has got some versatility to him. I actually really like this signing a lot. Like, this is the one to where, of course, you're taking, this is an evaluation, right? It's an evaluation based upon, like, what this kid could be, right? There's not a whole lot to go off of other than the outside of the ending of last season, right? Those 6 games to where he kind of came on. And he started showing a little bit here. He started showing some flashes, Zack Baun. I'm telling you, this guy gives me Andrew Van Ginkel vibes to him. He's a guy that could play off-ball stacked. That might be his role. He could be the third guy here in Philly. I don't know. I'll wait for camp to determine that, guys. He also could play overhang. You just saw it, guys. This guy can play overhang. Like, I'm telling you, I feel like Vic Fangio is trying to find that Kaiser White role. He wants that stacked off-ball linebacker that gives him the abilities to play him as an overhang when he wants to get that rotation as the pass rush in, right? To be able to get out there and match and carry, or to fall into a very specific drop or zone area and use those hips, use that vision to get to the football. And he also kind of wants that guy that he can come up and threaten the A and B gaps with if he's going to play him stacked and off ball. Like, I think that there's a versatility to this young man, right? There's a hybrid nature to him that really stands out. I really, really like that signing, guys. I think that's one of the underrated ones in this entire offseason that I don't see a lot of hype around it. I'm a little excited here, man, because I think there's some possibility. Could never work out, guys. We know how this stuff works. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but I at least get the vision. I get why they might be trying this. It makes sense to me in that sense, right? And also, like, you're trying to create competition, right? You got Julian Okwara. You got Brandon Smith. You got Patrick Johnson. If you're looking at the end of that roster, if you're going to reshape the way that you play your overhangs, well, you need to bring in that competition on the back end of things, right? That 4th, 5th guy, really a 5th guy, because you do have, until they move guys, you still have Brandon Graham, you still have Haason Reddick, you still have Bryce Huff, you still have Josh Sweat, you still have Nolan Smith. Like, it's definitely kind of a deep roster type, and that's why I think a hybrid player fits it better. But there's something there. Now I want to talk about stacked linebackers, and I want you to watch a little bit of what I'm going to show you guys, because there's some interesting stuff going on here, man. Like, there are some players in here that are definitely starting to catch my attention a little bit, and I think they're good players, just straight up. I just think that these are really, really solid players. So Nakobe Dean, Devin White, Ben Vansumeran, we can say are kind of our stacked linebackers right now, right? Nakobe Dean, Devin White both have reputations as being able to bring pressure from the linebacker spot. Devin White proving that in the NFL. Nakobe Dean having that reputation coming out of college. Ben Vansumeran still a really good athlete, but more of a special teamer, of course, right? There are some guys that we could technically bring back, and a Sean Bradley type, right? Special teams type player, that really back of your roster type guy that you could use if you had to, but he's really a special teamer. Got injured, missed the entirety of last season. Still a free agent technically. Zach Cunningham. little bit more of a run specialist who's got the size. He's got that reach. He's a little, he can be a little disruptive in a zone system because of that reach. He can make it hard to throw into windows, but this is not an athletic guy that's going to match up on a slot. He would get absolutely destroyed that way. Most linebackers would, to be fair. I'm going to show you Adrian Cooper, okay? Think about this. You got an off-ball stack linebacker, right? You got the Zack Baun stereotype we talked about. We're talking about like Andrew Van Ginkel and like the Kaiser White type role. I want you to watch Adrian Cooper versus Alabama here because this caught my attention real quickly. Top of your screen, guys. Sorry, let me share it because I didn't share it with you. I'm sitting here giving you instructions as if you can see. All right. I want you to look to the top of your screen. So not bottom this time, look top, okay? You'll see there's a circle. See the red circle? I want you to watch Adrian Cooper playing here as an overhang. Watch the fluidity. Watch the way that he plays here. Okay? Stacks it up, stays off of it, comes, boom, shuts it down. There's actually some other plays where he's a little bit more natural in terms of like playing that overhang. That one's a little bit more of like knowing your role, anticipating your role, and sticking to your role, right? To where he knew he had to keep containment. And because he did his job and he kept containment, he was able to basically pull off that play, get that sack because he's doing it. He's playing as an overhang. He does have containment responsibilities. You can see that he's pulling up and he's watching. You see his eyes directly there. I'm telling you, there's a couple of guys in this draft class that are very fascinating to me. If you're going to add what I think will be off-ball stack linebackers, truly they'll be off-ball stack linebackers, but they'll give you some of that ability to play as an overhang. They'll give you some of the ability to be a hybrid type player. They'll give you a certain athletic profile. Peyton Wilson has experience playing in a 3-3-5 system. Okay. That's just basically a nickel version of the 34. Okay. Where they're playing that extra safety down in there. He's got experience playing as that stacked inside linebacker. He's a good guy who can get pressure himself, man. He's very athletically gifted. He's got that ability. He's a very athletically gifted player. Early injury concerns, right? If you want to go, guys, I'm an NC State guy. I'm an alum. I can tell you that early on in his career, he had some injury concerns, but he's always been a really good player. And he's been healthy the last couple of years. Relatively healthy, I should say, okay? Then you got guys that I think are interesting if you get out of the first two rounds to see if they're still there. So you get to that third round, the early third round, or even into the later third round. I think Jeremiah Trotter's an interesting one because you can make a case that he's going to go at the end of the second round. You can make a case he's an early third rounder, right? The other guy that really catches my attention is from Michigan. It's Junior Colson. These are bigger physical guys, right? The ability to stack you, shed you. I will tell you there might be a little bit of a concern with Trotter, even though he's strong. That grip strength is going to be for real at the next level, guys. He's a little bit shorter in the arm reach than you probably typically want from that, but I'm just going to caution this, guys. So is TJ Edwards. TJ Edwards had less than a 32-inch arm reach as a linebacker, but he was just strong. He could see the play develop, and he got through the gaps before anyone could really get to him and cause him to get stacked up. So, I mean, to me, it's really about the reading at that level. But if you get to the second level there, you're going to get some people might be a little concerned with the arm reach there. But it's not like ridiculous, guys. I would be more concerned with Peyton Wilson getting reached to the second level than I would with Trotter Jr. Peyton Wilson, because even though he's athletic as crap, that dude's got under 31-inch arm reach. I love Peyton Wilson. I'm an NC State guy. I've definitely seen this guy work on the practice field before. He's phenomenal. He's going to be a good player in the NFL. Everybody has some limitations, though. Another guy that I think is really under the radar, and I sent a tweet out today. I think this would be a day 3 pick. So this is a developmental prospect, okay? Tyrese Knight, I believe he's coming out of UTEP, University of Texas El Paso, the Miners. When I was looking over his film, I started getting these really, really weird kind of vibes of who he reminded me of as a player, okay? Not that he is ever going to get the recognition coming out of college that this player I'm going to compare him to, which is Devin White, by the way. He's not going to be that kind of name coming into this draft class. This is a day 3 guy. I'm pretty certain of that. I mean, maybe a team takes him at the back end of the third or the really early day 3, like in the 4th, because they're just enamored with his, what his tape shows in terms of the athletic ability. But the reason he reminds me, Tyrese Knight reminds me of a Devin White is what Zierlein said about this young man, which is the first few words, guys, are going to catch you right off the way. Knight plays, sorry, guys, it just jumped on me. Knight plays a floating, freestyling brand of football from the second level, looking for opportunities to knife in and make plays. When you watch this young man's film as a day 3 pick, as a stacked outside kind of like off-ball linebacker, if you will, I do think that young man has a certain athletic profile to where the vision's got to catch up. His ability to diagnose blocking schemes has got to get better. But from the raw athleticism, that just daring nature to go attack the ball, do not wait. Do not act like your feet are in concrete where you're diagnosing too long. And now guys are climbing the second level and they're all up on you. When you look at this guy from that perspective, there's a little bit there. This is a guy you don't hear talked about a lot, but the athletic profile, like if we're looking at Nakobe Deans and the Devin Whites and the Ben Vansumerans, right? The Edgerrin Coopers, the Peyton Wilsons. I do think you got to put like a guy like Tyrese Knight in that conversation as well. Very athletically kind of gifted guy, right? And I hate when people do this when they look at like a full 40 time and they think the full 40 time is giving you like a lot of information. It's not. You have to know the splits, guys. And when you get a linebacker with a 1-5-4-10 split, that's explosive, guys. That's an explosive dude. That first 10 yards is going to be a little bit more important. Now, you can say, looking at the lateral movement of the hips, their ability to get sideline to sideline, tracking and closing plays down. Something I really loved about Edgerrin Cooper's film. I thought he was really good at actually tracking the ball, closing in on it. I mean, going from one side of the field to the other and closing it down. Like, I really thought he showed something there. This is interesting, guys. I do think that there's a chance that this is going to get better. We are going to get a lot better in terms of both on-ball and off-ball linebacker. It's going to look different, okay? We are going to be heavily, in my opinion, we're going to be heavily relying on that interior defensive line to hold up blocks. Like, our edges are going to probably be a little light, to be quite honest about it, right? Our linebackers are going to be a little bit more reactive and a little bit more instinctive, probably, okay? There's going to have to be, these guys have to get there and shoot the gaps. They can't be second guessing on their part, right? There's definitely going to be a little bit of a science to this. With that said, I think that you can start to see kind of the elements come into play of what they're looking for, the type of body style. And that's what I've been like. I didn't know what to expect with Vic. I knew his system really well, but I had to kind of get a feel for like, okay, what is this dude going to do within the system, right? Because he's always had guys like Bradley Chubb. Like when people tell me like a Josh Sweat doesn't fit him, like Josh Sweat is more athletically gifted than Bradley Chubb. I'm an NC State guy. I know Bradley Chubb as well. Like, love Bradley Chubb. He's a good player, but Sweat isn't Bradley Chubb. I'm not going to put him there. He's a good player, Sweat is, but he's a better athlete than Chubb, to be quite honest. So I'm like, I don't necessarily agree that he doesn't fit. I don't agree with that, but I do agree that if he's on the trade market, then that means that when they asked, which would you prefer? I mean, there's clearly been a decision. So I'm just kind of tracking where they're going with it, guys. The people they're showing interest in the top 30 visits, right? Basing off those top 30 visits, basing off of their free agency signings, what guys haven't I heard reported that I think on film show me something like, oh, okay, these might be one of these guys we don't hear linked to the Eagles, but here they are drafting them, right? A couple other names that I really liked a lot was Kentucky's Trevin Wallace. I thought he played a little violent, thought he played a little physical. Same thing. Sometimes I think he can kind of guess and gamble and miss on plays, but I do think that he plays bigger. He plays like a bigger linebacker. I really like this film a little bit. Jalen Ford out of Texas, another guy that I think would be more of a day 3 guy, Jalen Ford. I think he would be an interesting guy. He's a dude that I think gives me a little bit of TJ Edwards vibe, bigger, stronger guy. Not as long in the arm reach as you would think. I think he's sub 32-inch arm reach as well. So he's a little bit like Trot in that way. But, I mean, he plays physical. He plays strong. He's got that TJ Edwards vibe to me to where he's really good at diagnosing the angles, watching that blocking pattern, and beating you to it. So, I mean, I kind of like Jalen Ford's film a little bit, to be honest with you. I don't know that that's a Vic Fangio's the direction he would go. It's just I watched this film and I immediately thought TJ Edwards. I don't know that there's genuine interest there. It's just that if that kind of guy came off of there, that's what, you know what I'm saying? That's what I see there. I see that type of player. That's a TJ Edwards type player, in my opinion. All right, guys, let's get into the comments because I see there's a million of them here. Cal Bundy, what's up? What's going on, man? How you doing, bro? Just Family TV, what's good, bro? What's up, Troy? How you doing, man? EEZ, how you doing, buddy? Mir Slime, what's up, man? He said, what's up, Gate? I keep saying Baun was going to be a poor man's Van Ginkel after you explained him to me when we signed him, and that's who I was reminded of, Van. He might not be a big name, but he can give you something. Yeah, exactly. That's what I saw from him too. Mir Slime is like immediately I start watching his tape, and I had a buddy. I had a buddy tip me off to him that he was like, "Yo, if you like Van Ginkel," because he saw my post about Andrew Van Ginkel, and I thought like, well, he'd be a decent addition for the Eagles. He saw my post about that, and he was like, "Yo, you need to really check out Zack Baun from New Orleans." And he's like, "I know you're not a Saints fan, but he's like, I'm telling you, bro, if you like Van Ginkel, you'll like Zack Baun. Like, he's kind of in that space that Von Ginkel was like a year or two ago, to where no one knew him." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I checked him out, and I was like, "Yeah, dude's got a point." What's up, EC1? How you doing, bro? Baun, we can use him like Van Ginkel. Yeah, that's what I think. I think that's what they're going to try to do. Why did he never play as an edge for the Saints? He did. He played some overhang, not as a pure edge easy, but he played as an overhang. He had they just didn't, same kind of thing with Arizona, where it took them forever to figure out Haason Reddick, right? Same kind of thing with Zack Baun, where he played the majority of his career as a stacked off-ball backer. If you're going to use him as a stacked off-ball backer, he's going to be like one of your main backups. He's not. I don't think that he's the type of guy that's going to have the talent level of that kind of position to really probably rise up to challenge much. Unless, Devin White or Nakobe Dean would just have to completely not worth it, basically, for him to kind of step into that role. But I think if you look at him as a hybrid player, now you start increasing his snap count. He's going to play a little bit off ball, right? He's going to play a little bit as an overhang. Now you start ticking that snap count out for him a little bit, or up for him a little bit, especially with injury. What's up, Antonio? How you doing, man? My guy EC wants to hit that like button. Gay City brings great content. Great X's and O, guys. Hey, I appreciate you, man. Thank you, EC1. Go Birds, guys. Go Birds. That offensive tackle was washed out. He couldn't get any hands on him. Man, the way he dipped that corner, Antonio, whew, man. My guy James said hybrid. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, James. That's how I see him too. Is like he's going to be that Van Ginkel hybrid type player, I think, in this system. He will be used as Van Ginkel. Obviously, Howie wanted him in the draft and watches his career, but because signed him quickly. Oh, yeah, you're talking about the way that we signed basically Devin White? Or are we talking about the way he's kind of swooped in and took Zack Baun when no one saw it coming? I went to his college highlights, and dude was good in college. Okwara and Terrell Lewis. Yeah, they made some pretty interesting kind of like signings between the end of last year into the very beginning periods of the offseason this year. I really like the Brandon Smith, the Julian Okwara, and I like that Terrell Lewis signing. Like they're under the radar. I don't know the probability of making the roster, but I think if you're going to throw blindly at the dartboard, you know what I mean, Antonio? You're going to throw darts there. I like those darts. I like those 3 darts, man. Like those are the type of guys that give you a little upside here to kind of keep on the back end of your roster, or because you have those veteran rules now on the practice squad, you're probably going to keep one of those dudes around, one or two of those guys around if you can. James said, "Good morning, Coach. Your thoughts on getting Justin Simmons on the cheap? He played for Fangio and the defensive back coach." I mean, look, if you can get Justin Simmons in here, your safety rotation is going to be really good. I mean, when you got Justin Simmons, CJ Gardner-Johnson, who could be a safety, or they could just move him down and play nickel. I don't know. He's probably going to be another one of these hybrid types to where they'll probably move him around a little bit. And then you got, Blank. Then you got Sidney Brown. Like you would have a really, really good safety room. I don't know the price yet, guys. I know that he's asking for a certain dollar amount that we're clearly not ready to pay yet, but I don't want to say that I know what that figure is going to be. I don't know, guys. I mean, it's hard to say what Justin Simmons ultimately going to sign for. Good morning, Coach. What's up, True Savage? You say Edgerrin won't be there with their second pick, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, they could take him on that first round pick, but it would definitely be out of character for the Eagles and the way they've drafted for the past 20 some years, no doubt about it. But if they trade it backwards, easy. I think that's where it gets interesting, which is who's on the board, where do the Eagles value things, and depending on who's on the board, what do you do? Now, what I will say, EEZ, is depending on the way that this draft falls and the way they value things. The kid from Texas, that defensive tackle, if he's there in the first round, man, you put him beside Jordan Davis and you put him beside freaking, just that interior defensive line. Like, I'm kind of paying attention there because you got Milton Williams, of course, but I feel like they'll still try to add something. I feel like they're still going to keep trying to add there. They better get edge Cooper first round. Everybody behind us is bringing him in for top 30 visits. Yeah. I mean, it seems like they got genuine interest, Antonio. Like I said, I don't know how it's going to go. I mean, I think there's a few different guys in this draft class that I think could play a really pivotal role for the Eagles at like an off-ball linebacker. But I'm not going to lie that when I watched Edgerrin Cooper's film, I wasn't like just in awe with his athletic ability. It stood out to me, man, that I was like, wow, this is a bigger version of Kaiser White. This is a more put together version of Kaiser White, who is a converted safety down the linebacker. Like, I was like, I kind of see it a little bit. This is definitely one of those kind of key chess pieces you could use. He's going to be an interesting one to me, man. Catching Milrow 101s is underrated. I have to take a look at him. You like Tyler Guyton? Yeah, that's Lane Johnson's boy from Oklahoma. Or a cornerback with their first rounder, depending on how that board falls, easy. I think it's going to depend upon the way the board falls, to be honest. TJ Watt, TJ Edwards, Van Ginkel, and Zack Baun, they all played at Wisconsin. It's something about the way they have been coached that the NFL likes. Hey, Delco, that's a fair assessment, man. That's a good point to bring up. That is my guy, Colson. Yeah, Colson from Michigan. I really liked his film, man. He played physical. He's a physical player. I think Junior Colson, I think, would be very well liked here in Philadelphia. You can see one above all right behind you. I really want Junior Colson. Yeah, I think he's a guy that I think initially some of the fan base might not really be familiar with him. But I think as soon as this guy starts stepping on the field and starts lighting people up, he'd quickly become a fan favorite. Troy said, I really like the kid Cooper. I watched a couple of his games from college. He can definitely play. Yeah, he's around the ball all the time. Ball's on the ground, and it's a scramble drill for the fumble. Here comes Cooper with the ball, right? Dropping back in his zone, getting his hands on, deflecting the ball, being a willing and able pass rusher. Like I definitely think I think it's a guess, guys. This is purely a guess. And mind you, I'm an NC State guy. So this is not shade of Peyton Wilson. I like Peyton Wilson a lot. Would love the Eagles to draft him. I do think that Edgerrin Cooper is going to go off the board first, and then Peyton Wilson will follow right behind him. But I'm also going to say that probably scheme is going to matter a little bit. But I do think both of these guys, they kind of fit similar schemes. It's like, I think if Peyton Wilson didn't have the earlier injury history when he was really young in NC State, that I think that he'd probably be a lot for the first guy coming off. But I just know the way organizations are about these really high linebacker picks. And I do think that the early injury history with Peyton Wilson, the shorter arm reach, I feel like somebody's probably going to gravitate a little bit more towards Cooper because of those very subjective small things, those little details. I do think that's going to happen, but Cooper's a player, man. Wilson's a good player. I really like Junior Colson. I think Trotter Jr. is very physical. He's got that grip strength, man. The way he was just ripping people and throwing them down. Like, I mean, there's some talent in this linebacking core this year. This linebacker draft is really good. Colson's my boy. A sleeper linebacker I think can be a steal on day 3 is John Trey Hunter. I haven't had a chance to look at him yet, one above all. I'll take a look at him and see. John Trey Hunter, what school? Going to check him out. Yeah, I haven't heard of him yet either, but I'm going to take a look. There's a lot of linebackers in this draft class. My guy Troy said, I would love to see Trotter Jr. in Midnight Green following in his father's footsteps. Georgia State. I feel like Fangio is not happy with missing out on McKinney. No other top-tier safety available. Justin Simmons signed. I don't think he's signed anywhere yet, but I don't know. I didn't really look this morning, to be honest, Antonio. He's too expensive, apparently. Yeah, I don't know exactly what that market is, guys. I'm not sure what he's asking for. Like, I get sometimes people will leak things to me, but like, as a content creator, when people DM you and they start telling you these things, I'm always a little bit apprehensive to then go back and tell you guys, because people can say anything. They can pretend to be anybody on the internet. So you know what I mean? Like, I don't know who that guy is that's giving us the information. Like, sometimes they turn out to be legit and are really good sources. I can tell you, during the 2020 NFL draft, Mike had a dude that was an insider that was telling him all the picks, like 3 picks ahead. So like, we knew all the picks, 3 or 4 picks before anyone else did. So we knew about Jalen Hurts. We knew about Rager. We knew about all those picks before they happened. And we had to sit there in the second round when Jalen Hurts was picked, we knew the pick already, and we had to just act like we didn't. And we were all like kind of processing it. Philly Fresh, Philly Mike, and myself, we were all processing what had been told to us. Do you think they get another defensive lineman in the draft? I do. I do, Antonio. Just the way they value the position. You know what I mean? Like, I definitely think that somewhere they're going to take a stab at somebody. Ford is slow. I like him, though. Yeah, that's why I'm saying, like, TJ Edwards was the same way. TJ Edwards had to kind of work himself into shape a little bit. I think that the specialty of Ford, I think the specialty of Edwards wasn't necessarily their foot, speed. It was their ability to diagnose that play quickly enough to not let that be a limitation, right? So that way they can get through the gaps and close it off. And then they played very physical. Both of those dudes are really freaking physical, man. You need defensive tackle depth. Yeah, in at 34. Yeah, I agree. I think they do need a little bit more there. My guy, Don Quinn, said, Van Ginkel is exactly who I think of with Baun. Yeah, that's the vibes I got too, man. Victor Johnson said, what's going on, Steven? What do you think about Dallas Turner from Alabama? Haven't had a chance to go in depth on film yet, Victor. As I kind of get a little bit more involved in the film, which is definitely like, we're going to start doing mock drafts here in another week or two. Right now, guys, I know some of you are going to be like, Steve, where have you been? Why have you not been posting content? Guys, remember, I just got custody over my niece who is an infant. And she's in the hospital, guys. So like time's kind of getting taken up a little bit, right? I mean, I'm trying to deal with that situation. We're hoping to get her back home by the end of this month or the beginning of April. So that way, she'll be chilling with me when we do live streams and stuff. So, that's part of what's going on, guys. That's why I haven't been able to go and make as much content as I normally do around this time of year. Gates, how do you feel about Tavondre Sweat? He plays like a linebacker at the defensive tackle position. Go Birds, born alone, die alone. I have to take a look a little bit more in terms of what he does in terms of the interior defensive line. But we're going to do that. The interior defensive line is probably going to be our next live stream, born alone. That's probably going to be the next set of guys that we're going to bring up. We're going to take a look at what that rotation looks like, and then we'll probably follow up the defensive line with probably taking a look at the secondary, the corners, safeties, that kind of market, and what it looks like in terms of the draft this year. He played overhang and will linebacker. How do you think the first 3 picks of the draft turn out, Gate? I mean, they went out there and they got the blockbuster deal, done in terms of getting a running back in here. Then they followed that up by getting, edge help, getting that edge rusher. We look at them signing 2 linebackers. One of them, obviously, Zack Baun being a bit of a hybrid player. My gut tells me to look at linebacker. My gut tells me to pay attention to the secondary. And then also, I just know this team. I know that they're probably going to want more depth in the interior defensive line. Those are the 3 spots, like right now, that are ringing out to me, along with like a backup tight end. Albert O could be that solution, to be honest. They clearly brought him back for a reason. But also, I'd say backup tight end. I'd also say slot receiver. I don't know that they're sold on Devontae Parker being the 3. I think Devontae Parker is one of those guys where they're bringing him in here because there's little risk to the deal. He's a veteran guy. I think he gives you a little bit of red zone ability. You don't need to separate that much in the red zone. You just need to have strong hands, come down with the football. And I think he gives you that little bit of an insurance policy as a 4th wide receiver. So they may not have that slot wide receiver yet on the team. They might not have that number 3. Obviously, they move the slot around a little bit. Obviously, they can do something. Albert O is a little athletic, guys. He's a dude that could give you some of those type of reps as well. Not a true slot receiver, but out of 12 personnel, he can give you that kind of functionality. So obviously, they can do some things to supplement it, but I don't think that guy's on the roster yet, personally. Yeah, he's a guy you can drop into coverage off the edges too. Yeah, exactly. James said, hey, Gabe, who would you move up in the draft to get on defense, and which picks would be worth it? That's a great question, man. Let me take a look. Let me give an honest opinion on who I think would go ahead of us and where I would go in terms of getting that. So I'm going to take a look at we know quarterbacks are going to fly off the board. 2 or 3 of them are coming off in the top, 12 picks. I think that's going to be an obvious one. Marvin Harrison Jr. Let's take a look here. Dallas Turner is getting a lot of noise. I don't think Dallas Turner is going to be in position for us to get. I like Jarrett Verse, but I don't know the fit in Vic Fangio's scheme. I like Jarrett Verse. I got to do some thinking on that one. I don't know how I feel in terms of him being a very good fit in Fangio's scheme. I'm not saying he's not a fit, guys. I'm saying I need to do more homework. I think he's similar to Brian Burns. I think he's similar to Josh Sweat. I think he's that prototypical Florida State kind of outside linebacker, overhang edge type player. He interests me. Jarrett Verse interests me a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I like the kid Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo, the cornerback. I really like his tape a lot. I think he's a really good player. I don't know that they are going to keep adding edges, but I mean, the Eagles and edge players, they're always going to be looking. Latu, or I don't know how you say his name. You know what I'm talking about, from UCLA. He's a kid that they probably wouldn't need to go that far up to go get. It might even fall to them. If they still feel like they're going to want future assets at safety, Cooper DeJean, Chop Robinson, another guy, kind of very similar to Jarrett Verse. I think you can kind of see him playing that kind of a hybrid role, if you will. Byron Murphy II is the guy I got my eye on. He's a guy that I think if you took Byron Murphy II and you put him beside, a guy like, just look at this, Milton Williams, this interior defensive line in general. And you take Byron Murphy II and you plug that in there with the amount of athleticism we have here. I think that interior defensive line would be a problem. In terms of the defense, those are the guys I look at. I don't know how to judge the cornerback market because everyone is all over the place on where they think these guys are going to go. Like Kool-Aid McKinstry is like all over the place where I see people saying he's going to go. There's another corner that I've seen, Nate Wiggins from Clemson. I keep seeing him move all up and down the board, so I don't know exactly where they see him going. But I will say that the one corner, the young man out of Toledo, Mitchell, I think he's going to be a ball player. I think he's going to be a really good player. Outside of that, guys, I don't even know if we're going to necessarily need to move up that high if we wanted a Byron Murphy. I think it's just going to depend upon how many quarterbacks come off the board, how many of these corners, the corner backs, how many of those guys are going to get factored in to that top 16 area, right? We're talking about the top half of the draft. That's where I think it gets interesting because generally speaking, I think most teams, unless you're a certain type of athlete, they don't really want to mess with the secondary in the top 16 picks unless it's a sure shot like a lock. And those guys are normally top 10 picks, honestly. But then when you get past that 16th pick, I think that's when a lot of your secondary players start really coming into place. That's where you can start seeing a lot of guys getting picked up, if you will. Are you putting that draft book out this year again? Yeah, I can make one real quick. I can talk about some of the players I think are really good scheme fits for the Eagles. Yeah, Zack Baun, I like him a lot, man. So I love coming here. Football fans who love the intricacies are here. I'm always learning. Hey, man, I appreciate y'all. What do you think about James Williams, 6'4" safety? Got to look at more film, Kevin. I got to look at a little bit more film before I give a determination there. Right now, I just kind of finished off with linebackers. I'm kind of moving in to get a little bit more familiar with what I think is coming up on the horizon in terms of, the interior defensive linemen. For my interior defensive linemen, then I'm going to look outward probably to the secondary corners and safeties, and I'll give you guys, that'll probably be about 2 more weeks from now. That's probably when we're going to do that one. Sorry, guys. Let me go down. I see we got a super chat. Stephen B., I appreciate the $4.99 super chat, but he says, hey, Gay City, do you think there's a chance the Eagles move down from 22? I think there will be still a lot of talent in the second round. I do think that you could see an acquiring of picks, right? Because they could move down from 22 to either further down in the first round or high up in the second round. And then when you're sitting there with 50 and 53, something like that, I think it's possible that they also take one of those 2 picks and trade that back down into the upper part of the third round. So I definitely do. I don't think that's, crazy out there, Steve. I think you're in the realm of how he likes to do his mental gymnastics with the draft. The guy likes to do a lot, man. He's definitely one of these guys that likes to do a whole lot there. I'm going to speed up a little bit, guys. Sweat in a 4th for PS2. Book it. Hey, that's a great corner, man. That's a lockdown corner, Anderson. I'll take that in a heartbeat. What up, Gate? What's up, Linda? How you doing? It's Jalen Ford and Cedric Gray if we grab early and third for me. Cedric Gray, athletic type. I know I'm a little biased because he's a UNC player and I'm an NC State guy. He's a little light for me. I don't love the combination of him and Nakobe Dean together, personally. Edge not so great in tight quarters versus blockers. Hi, Gay City. What's up, Donnie? How you doing, man? What's up, Michael? How you doing, buddy? Do you think this free agency acquisition changed the draft approach for the Eagles? Absolutely, Linda. I think they definitely started plugging in some of the holes. I think anytime you're dealing with Howie, I think his overview and his insight to how he wants to approach the new draft, I think before we've definitely reached for needs and we've gotten burnt. But I think, the way he looks at it now is he wants to shore up as many positions as possible so we don't go in there with like an Achilles heel that we have to address. So that way you can truly take the guy you think is the best player on the board and can make an impact. So I think that's their strategy currently. And I think that's what we'll probably see going into this one because I think they're going to try to shore up. Right now, I think the Achilles heel would be post this year. What do you do with the secondary, right? We got a lot of young guys that we're still trying to figure out. I don't know that we have that bookend guy yet outside of like Slay and when Bradbury. Those guys, even if they are here this year, they're likely gone following this year. So I think that's probably one of the areas to where like guys are saying like, you might see them go ahead and try to get like a Surtain in here or another player of that caliber. Wilson and Edge, definitely similar. Agree with that. Do you think Cooper can become an edge off ball like Van Ginkel? I think he could be a hybrid player. I don't know if he would be a permanent guy that would play the edge, Ken, but I think he could be a hybrid player. I think you could see him in the role of like a Van Ginkel. You could see him in the role of like what I think they're going to do with the Zack Baun. But I also think that he's a bigger physical, probably a better athletically gifted version of Kaiser White. And I loved Kaiser White, guys. I was the one that called him here to Philadelphia before it happened because I thought he was just going to be a really good fit for Gannon in that system. I just think that like a guy like Edgerrin Cooper can kind of give you that type of versatility, right? To where he's really an off-ball stack linebacker, but he's got that kind of versatility to play as an overhang. He's got the ability as a pass rusher to come up in those A and B gaps as an off-ball backer, right? You can use him to match and carry in short distances within zones with like, athletically gifted tight ends, some bigger, taller, physical receivers, right? The play that stands out to me from the 22 season is when they had Kaiser White locked up on CeeDee Lamb. Tuck, don't trying to come at me, bro. I'm not trying to throw shade. I'm just stating what happened. They had him locked up on CeeDee Lamb, and he actually got in there and broke the ball up. I think Edgerrin Cooper gives you that short window. Obviously, anybody trying to stick CeeDee Lamb for 20 yards as a linebacker, my money's on CD to win that. But when you're talking about a 5 to 7 yard kind of match carry and pass him off, you're looking for a guy with a little bit of fluidity in his hips, right? I think Edgerrin Cooper he showed a little bit of that on film. I think he can do that type of thing. What do you think about Tommy Eichenberg? I haven't had a chance to go deep into his film, but more of a physical style player, I think. To be honest, is what struck me is the way that, he was kind of physical at the point of attack there. I want to take a little bit more of a look into him, though, before I give like a true, feeling on what I think he is in terms of his NFL projection. Cedric Gray, what's up, Mr. Rudy Poo? I love the Rock avatar. So I'm going to say this. Cedric Gray, very athletically gifted. Movement guy. You can make the arguments that a lot of things I'm saying about guys like Kaiser White that were converted safeties into linebackers. Nicholas Morrow converted safety into linebacker. These dudes that had a little bit of movement ability to them. You could say a lot of the same things about Cedric Gray. Although I do think that if you believe what's being, the combine, if that's his real playing weight, not that if I believe the number is accurate, but that's his playing weight throughout the season, if you will. You can say that, well, Cedric Gray, I think, is going to be ahead of them physically, right? He's not coming into the combine at 216, 220. He's coming in at like 230-ish. So he's got like that 10 pounds on him or so. So you could say that he's probably a little bit more put together as a young player compared to those type of guys, but I think he's that kind of movement guy. Gay, how do you feel about Max Melton? Decent player. He's a decent player, but I got to look. I need to see some of these guys in terms of what I think the scheme fit would be for Philly. And that's really what I'm trying to narrow down on some of these guys is like, if they're brought in here to Philadelphia, exactly what is the role? Like, how would they be fitted within the scheme, right? Like, that's the trouble I had with Jeremiah Trotter Jr., who was a guy I would really love to see in Eagles green, right? Just to have Trot Jr. here, it's a nice story. But then I'm kind of looking at it and I'm like, okay, he could be an enforcer. He could be that strong enforcer guy. But I need to feel more comfortable with him in terms of his ability to drop into coverage for Fangio. I need to feel like he can do that. And I'm not saying I have my mind made up on that kind of thing yet. I'm still kind of a little bit of a homer, a little bit of a fanboy when it comes to Trot Jr. But those are the type of questions I'm asking myself, you know what I mean, when it comes to those scheme fits and some of these guys that I like, you know what I mean? I'm a bit of a fanboy of because I follow college ball too. Who is Philly getting next? I still think that they might be a little underwhelmed with their situation at backup quarterbacks. I would watch to see if there's a move there. I personally would like to see the young kid get a chance. I thought he had a really good preseason, but I don't know that they feel that way. They might want to push him a little bit. So I would look to see if they sign somebody in that realm. I don't know that they're completely, if they feel great about the interior defensive line. I watch to see what they do with the interior defensive line. And they might not be settled at safety yet either. There's reason to believe that either they're going to try to add another safety or they're going to look into that nickel cornerback market, because I still think there's a little bit of a hole there that needs to be filled. Now we can talk about the ability, the possibilities of moving a guy like Isaiah Rodgers, who's mostly played that field side corner. And a lot of those field side corners have very similar movement skills. They have the hips and the raw athleticism of what we see from the nickel corners. But Isaiah Rodgers has to prove that he can play in traffic. That's the difference, right? Is that when you play the field, you have all this space to play. But when you're playing as a nickel, a lot of times you got to work through that traffic. So he would have to show us that he could do that, because it's not something he's really done as a pro very often. So, I mean, that's something we'd have to look into if that's what we're projecting. The other thing is CJ Gardner-Johnson, are they going to kind of mix him into that kind of safety hybrid nickel role? I don't know. I mean, they could do something like that as well. So that's like the nickel spot. I think an extra safety could be in play. I think interior D line, backup quarterback, tight end too. I don't know how they feel. I think they like Alberto. I think Alberto is going to get a crack at it, but I wouldn't be shocked if they brought in more competition there. I would love for them to draft Cedric Gray. Max Melton with our second rounder would be great. I like him, but I don't know what I'm looking at from a scouting standpoint. All right, I'll do you guys a solid here. Let me write down Max Melton for you. Max Melton. I want to get a chance to take a look at, I'm very familiar with what Fangio did in Denver. I'm very familiar with what Fangio did with Miami. I want to see a little bit more of what he did in Chicago. And I want to get a feel for that system and that scheme, which was very cover six heavy. I do remember that aspect of Chicago. I want to get a feel for what Fangio was doing in Chicago. And then let me take a look at Max Melton, guys, and I'll make a video. I'll make a video on Max Melton, and I'll explain what I see in terms of the fit here. So we'll do a Fangio system fit. So I'll try to get that video out for you guys. I remember that live. Antonio, that was crazy, man. That year that we all knew, and we were just sitting there, we were all trying to figure out exactly what are they doing. I like the Matt Hennessy pickup. His tape from Temple looks good. Yeah, outside of the injuries, he's a solid player. He can definitely push the right guard spot. He's definitely a solid backup plan at center. Or in the worst case scenario, worst case scenario is that Jurgens isn't ready to pick. I think physically he's ready. I think Jurgens going to be quite good from the physical standpoint of playing center, but there could be the mental lapse where he's got to pick up blitz schemes and understand shifting and ultimately the line, that the protection schemes and all that stuff. He gives you that, right? But you saw the injury concern with Matt Hennessy, though. He hasn't been healthy in the last couple of years. But I do think that's a very smart play by Howie, the way that he went after that situation. Everybody wants Cooper. I would be good with Wilson. Big birds. Wilson wants 17 per year. Whew, that's steep. That's steep. I'm not going to say he won't get it, Troy, but we'll see. That's going to be tough. It's a tough sell. I remember that live during the draft. We were all in shock. Yeah, trying to figure it out. I think I was like, I don't know, maybe it's a bigger play for a trade or something. I didn't understand it either. They had just, given Carson that big contract the year prior in 2019. And it was like, oh, man, this is not good. Hey, it turns out it was a heck of a pickup, man. We would have been up the creek without a paddle with the way things turned out with Carson. So thankfully they did make that pick. What up, Gate? What's up, Kev? Talking Birds. Lane is still here for 3 seasons, so Guyton would be too soon unless he plays right guard. I don't know if he's got guard flexibility easy. I don't know if Lane's going to last 3, man. I think Lane's he's up in the air. I think you could be right. He could play 3, right? I mean, from an age standpoint, I don't think age is the factor. I think it's more of the health, the desire. I think it's those type of things with Lane that I'm a little worried about. But I think your overall point is right, that if you pick Guyton in the first round, you're stockpiling, right? That guy's probably not going to do much unless you get him involved in a right guard competition. I feel we need another nose tackle to back up Davis. Yeah. I mean, I could see that. I mean, they were rotating in. Jalen Carter will play a little nose when they need him to, and they were rotating in Fletch. Of course, the big Samoan, he was a collegiate nose tackle that's on our roster. They got Noah Ellis as well, another Samoan or Polynesian at least. So yeah, I could see that, Ken. I could see that need being something that becomes critical, like a guy that could come in and give you 10, 12 snaps if you need them in a game. Got to get some Eagle stuff on the wall behind you. Yeah, this is just the dining room area, guys. I had to, like I said, I'm bringing home my niece. So I had to, the things I had as my office, I got to give that to my niece. So my brother's going to come out. My brother's going to build me an addition on the house, and we're going to build the addition into being the new office. So eventually, guys, we're going to reset up again. Thank you. I appreciate that, guys. Family before football every day of the week. Don't worry. You're doing the right thing. Take care of your family. No need to explain it. I appreciate you guys. I knew you guys would understand what you guys knew. I just didn't have, I didn't want to put like a weird YouTube post out there for that. It's just strange to do that. I figured it'd be better just when I finally get the time to go live, I could just tell you guys exactly what's going on. Appreciate you, James. Appreciate you, buddy. Okay, take care of the fam. Praying for her and your family. Thanks, guys. I appreciate that, guys. Hit that like button. Appreciate you guys. What do you make of the tampering rumors with Barkley? Philadelphia. I don't know if I put too much stock into it. I think they all kind of tamper, to be honest. But obviously, the hindering point of why we're being targeted and why guys that signed 5 minutes after free agency aren't being targeted is whether or not the negotiating was with the agent or with the player. Barkley said it wasn't with him personally, that it was with his agent. So, I mean, I don't know what they could be proved. You know what I mean, Philadelphia? I don't know how you prove it from their perspective. Like, I think they would have to find a way of proving that there was contact. I don't think you can use, second, third party source. That doesn't seem to, I don't think that would hold up very well. NFL reality check. So Gates, we have either ran a wide 9 or a 4-3 for years now. Do you think switching to a 34D will give us an edge over our division because they haven't really seen us in a 34 as a unit before? I think it'll be a little bit like we ran a hybrid stuff, right? We did run some 34 with Gannon. We ran it with, even last season, we were running some 34 stuff, but we were a hybrid system, right? We were definitely kind of a hybrid to where it was more of a 40 front or a 50 front at times, where they would bring in and cover both guards with the center. So it's not a bare front because of the way you're still shaping things, but it's in that realm of things, if you will. Fangio's been around for a while, man. They got tape on Fangio. I think Fangio's got to be willing to let some of these younger guys he's bringing in help out a little bit. Try to keep this thing a little fresh, right? I think we saw a little bit with Miami. He kind of pulled back a little bit from the cover 6. He pulled back a little bit from the too high stuff. He ran a little bit more cover 3 than people were expecting. So I think he's got to mix it up a little bit. They need to be, because Fangio's been around the league for a really long time. Honestly, seeing how good defense linemen are always available in free agency and trade, how good cornerbacks aren't available, makes me think we should favor cornerback over defensive line for the upcoming draft. Yeah, I'm always of the opinion easy. You should be in a position that you take the best player available. Like, you should do everything you can to shore up enough of your roster to where you don't get hindered if you think player A is a better player than player B. Like, you know what I mean? They both can be really good players, but if you got one guy rated higher than the other, you should put yourself in a position to take that higher rated player. I don't know if they're going to do that. I'm hoping easy, but we'll see, man. What's up, Gate? How you doing, buddy? Can't say this channel is great. You break stuff down like nobody else in Eagles community. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that, man. Praying for you and your family. Hey, man, I appreciate you guys. Thank you all so much. Is Chop Robinson worth our first? Ken, I think that's a big discussion around how much do you need on the edges. I think that's where it gets a little difficult, right? It's like, okay, Steve, you already talked about the fact that they could use Zack Baun in a hybrid role doing that. They got Haason. They got Bryce Huff. They also made these under-the-radar signings. You know, they still have Nolan Smith as well, but, you know, they made those under-the-radar guys in like Brandon Smith and Julian Okwara and Terrell Lewis. Like, I kind of get where it's like, at what point are we just like, you know what I mean, doing a little too much there? BG still under contract. But I think if you look long-term, Ken, I think that's where I'm looking at is you always hear these GMs say that they're not looking in a 1-year increment, right? They're looking at 3-year increments, if you will. Well, if you look past this year, you could say that there's a chance that Julian Okwara is not on the roster. Brandon Smith's not on this roster. Patrick Johnson's not on this roster. You could say that Terrell Lewis isn't on this roster. Teron Jackson's not on this roster. Brandon Graham is probably retiring after this year. And Josh Sweat looks like a trade candidate right now, right? Potential, possibility. I'm not opposed to keeping Josh Sweat personally, but you know what I mean, guys. I think if you look past just this year, I think that's where you might see them maybe say like, okay, like we do need to think about the future a little bit. But yeah, it's a fair point, Ken. J Sid coming in with the $9.99 super chat, man. I appreciate that, guys. Great work. I'm looking for another tight end that can block. Double tight end needs to be a staple control line of scrimmage. Still need linebackers, Van Ginkel and draft. I think Van Ginkel might have signed J Sid recently with the Vikings. I thought I saw that. But to be honest, I didn't I didn't really read into the article, but I did think I saw something like that posted. Yes, I think you're right. I think you can make a case that because Zack Baun is going to be a hybrid player more than likely, that you really only have true 3 off-ball backers, which is Nakobe, Devin White, and, Vansumeran. So you probably need to go into the draft, and even post-June, you might need to bring a veteran in as well. Like, I think you can make that case, Jason. I don't think you're being unreasonable there. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to find out where I just left off. I probably should have paid a little better attention to that. My bad, guys. Easy said they had a top 30 visit with that tight end kid. Watch out for him in the second round. I like where you're going with it, Easy. That's definitely a move I can see as well. Coach, your thoughts on Corley, wide receiver from Kentucky? He's a slot yak machine. Yeah, I think slot receiver. I think just like what Easy was saying, getting that stabilized kind of tight end that is a backup that could potentially, start making things interesting with Dallas Goedert when we come up to the third contract. You know what I mean? He's already signed the first contract extension, so he's past that rookie deal now. But when you get around to that third negotiation, like kind of what we saw with Zach Ertz, right? That's where you start kind of, you know what I mean? You got to start looking for those things. But yeah, I think James, I'm with you. I could see that happening. Mitchell Gold Jacket. Yeah, man, he's a good player. I love that dude's film. He was more physical than I thought his size showed. Like when I first saw that he was sub 200 pounds, I was like, all right, like that's not that small for a corner, but let me just see how, let me see how he plays actually on the tape. I was like, oh, okay. Like this dude's decent. Like he's actually a pretty physical player. I could see him being able to play both the boundary and field. I think he can play either side. Hope everything gets better soon with your knee skate. Hey, I appreciate that. Born Alone, Die Alone. We're hoping it as well too. Just to give you guys a little update, I'll tell you kind of what's going on here. She has a desire to eat, so she will eat, but she's aspirating. So, guys, I've never raised an infant before. This is my first time having to deal with this situation. But apparently, there's the process of what they say they're supposed to take the bottle, they suck the nipple of the bottle, then they're supposed to swallow, and then after they swallow, they're supposed to breathe before they go back again. She's just so eager that she's just basically aspirating because it's not going all the way down. Right now, they're thinking that probably the best way to get her out of the hospital and then pretty much like in an area to where she can kind of like grow. They say that if you get her in a home environment that the kids tend to do better. So they're thinking about putting a G tube in her, guys, which is just like a little tube that connects to part of her stomach. And then you basically, just like the machines in the hospital act when they feed it through their nose, it's a similar kind of thing, but without a machine, it's with, I think, a syringe. If I understand everything correctly, then you bottle feed her and then she kind of catches up between those two. And then eventually, from what I understand, from what they told me, guys, is that it heals on its own, basically. Like you could just pull it out and it'll basically heal over on its own, essentially. So it's not like a really invasive surgery, but definitely still scary, man. I was like, what? When they were trying to explain it to him, like they had to bring a doll. I had so many questions, guys. They brought a freaking doll baby out to show me this surgery and how it works. Cause I was like, yo, you're going to have to walk me through this. I like the CSU tight end Holker. What do you think? And do we draft a quarterback to develop? Eagles realist. I think both points could be. I think backup tight end is a real possibility. Absolutely. And I also think that you could see them potentially covet a quarterback if the backup market is too expensive. You know, I definitely think you could see that kind of work its way out. Mr. Rudy Poo with the $5 super chat says, Gate, which corners would you personally take at 22? Same for which linebackers? I really like the kid out of Toledo personally. I think he's going to be a good player in the league. I don't think he's the only option there. I'm not saying that, guys. I definitely think that, you know, you could take a chance on a Nate Wiggins. But for me, personally, I like Quinion Mitchell the most. I think that that's the guy that intrigues me the most just because I think that he gives you some use as he could be a field corner. Think like when I say field corner, guys think Slay's role, or he could play as a boundary. I think his tape showed me a guy that has a little fight to him. So that's more of the James Bradbury role. You get into like Nate Wiggins. Nate Wiggins, I think, would definitely be more of a that guy's going to be a little bit more of a field corner. Just like a lot of the Clemson corners are a little light. They're not the biggest guys in terms of their weight. The weight more than the height with him. I mean, you could make the argument that other guys have been a little light, then they put 10, 15 pounds on in the league and they do play the boundary, but there had to be further development with Wiggins if you're looking for a boundary corner, personally. Kool-Aid. I know a lot of you guys like Kool-Aid. Sub 6 foot guy, but I think he's just under 6 foot. I don't think it's like drastically. I think he's like 5'11-ish. About 200 pounds. He's put together a little bit better. I like Kool-Aid. I think Kool-Aid could be a player in the league, and I think he's definitely a guy that's probably could be in the range of where we're picking in the first round. You probably could also maybe even make an argument depending on the way that the board falls. If those corners don't come off the board as quickly as we think, you might be able to kind of get lucky and maybe trade backwards in the corner market. Because, I mean, you still got Lassiter out of Georgia. You know that they love those guys. You know, Rakestraw, I liked Rakestraw's tape a lot. He's a guy that I think if you trade it backwards in the first round, I think you can make a case for either of those guys, Mr. Rudy Poo. I think it just depends on where do you want to trade forward and try to target a guy, or are you going to try to get backwards a little bit into the first or early second and then retarget, you know, what you got there. I think Rakestraw is the one that interests me. I see some people have him as a second. Some people got him as the end of the first, beginning of the second. I've seen other people that got him like right around the back half of the first round. So between pick 17 to, 25, 26 range. So right around where we'd be picking. Could go ahead of us, could go right where we're at, basically. He's an interesting one to me, Mr. Rudy Poo. Rakestraw. I like this film a little bit more than I thought I would. Sometimes I'd like to be a little bit of a contrarian, and when everyone was coming in on the Rakestraw stuff, I was expecting not to like his tape, and then like I actually watched his tape, and I was like, actually, they kind of got me, man. I kind of like him. Not gonna lie. Stryker said, how do you think they will use Devin White? I think they're looking at a guy that they need a guy that can play space. So if Nakobe Dean's going to be your Mike, and Nakobe's going to have that responsibility of diagnosing, reading, and getting through, and it's going to be very much on a timing thing, like the timing basis, then you need the sideline guy. You need the sideline guy in case it gets bounced outside, someone that can come from that weak side over to the other side and get to the ball. So you need that speed. I do think that he's a pretty good blitzer. Like I think we've always known that about him. He's a really good blitzer. I think if you're just dropping him, if you're spot dropping him, Stryker, and he's not matching up very often on slot receivers or very shifty, athletically gifted, kind of like tight ends, like a Darren Waller type that can kind of take you a little bit, even though Darren Waller is getting a little older. And I think the injuries have kind of caught off the Waller a little bit, but you know what I'm saying? Like a guy that's got a little bit of, they're not quite a wide receiver in terms of their foot patterns, but they're better than the average tight end, if you will. I think that's where, like, you might get in a little bit of trouble with him in coverage with White. But if you're just dropping him and you're letting him use his athleticism to kind of read what's going on and potentially jump the ball, that I think you got something there. Do you think they use Devin White in different formations? I heard he's bad in coverage. Yeah, I wouldn't, like I said, I probably wouldn't lock him up on a slot corner and ask him to match and carry for anything past like 5 yards. If he's going to match and carry within and deliver within 5 yards, I'm fine. Like, he's underlying athleticism. He just needs to learn not to get beat off basically the hike. He's got to make sure that initial release from the receiver, he doesn't get shaked. You know what I mean? With that said, like, if you're in a zone system, it's really about getting back into the proper area, into the proper distance of the zone, right? Getting where you're supposed to be, and then using your eyes to get yourself to the ball. In that role, I think you're going to be fine, right? I don't think that – I think people overblow it sometimes, right? To me, it's about how soft you create those zones. Last year, I thought that those under zones were entirely too soft. I thought a lot of our linebackers were catching crap, Nakobe Dean and these guys, but it's like, realistically, if you look at the way that they were dropping them, like, it wasn't good, man. I mean, I don't know how they were supposed to impact a play. Like, I thought they were being a little too soft in that underneath area. It was just a little too easy to pitch and catch on us. Do you see Cooper DeJean as a better fit as a cornerback or safety? I'm really liking him in Philly. It might be the bias here, one above all. I mean, you know what I mean? But I do think that probably a safety. I get that some people are listing him as a corner and they see him more as a corner. I think he's probably going to be a little bit more of a safety. But, you know, I mean, you look at Malcolm Jenkins, started off as a corner, got into the league, transitioned to safety, became a really good player. I think Cooper DeJean is kind of that strong side safety. He interests me. I think he can be pretty good. Tremaine Edwards is better than Verse. Bro, Kalen King has fallen. His stock was a first round. Now it's a late second, near the 30. A lot of people and draft guys been saying, and even in mock simulators have him falling. Yeah, it's that time of year, man, where you're going to see the rise and the falls. The real ones that are hurt, Mir Slime, is when you get like a day or two outside the draft and something happens. You know, when the leaked reports come out and all that kind of stuff happens. Parker used to cook us when he was with the Dolphins. Yeah, I remember the the Ronald Darby play. But I wouldn't mind if Helly would go after Boyd, Tyler Boyd. What's up, Matt? How you doing, Bryce? Says, hey, Gatesy, are you a former coach? Yes, sir. I spent about 10 years coaching. Gate City, I hear Devin White is bad in coverage. Do you think they use him different places with Vic Fangio's scheme? Yeah, I don't think, like I said earlier, Striker, I don't think it's ideal to match him up to where he's going to have to match and carry. Now, if he's going to carry with a running back, like, that's fine. Like, he's athletic enough to keep up with running backs. I mean, obviously, a guy like Christian McCaffrey or that side, like, of course, there's still a little bit of concern there. But for the majority of running backs, I'm okay with him picking up and carrying that player. But when you're talking about slot receivers, you're talking about really gifted, tight ends that are really good at basically getting to the top of their route stem and setting you up with those option routes. That's where I get a little concerned with him. I just don't think that he's a natural at doing that, even though he's really athletically gifted. But if you're spot dropping him, if he's just literally dropping into a window and using his eyes and then trying to disrupt the play, I think he'll be just fine, honestly. You sound like you have coaching knowledge. Appreciate that, man. Thoughts on Devin White? I mean, look, he didn't live up to what he was supposed to be, guys. I mean, there's no way around that, right? I mean, the guy was a top 5 pick. He didn't live up to what we thought he would want to be upon a time. With that said, I mean, it's not hard to see why the Eagles are rolling the dice here. I mean, he's just kind of he's a type of athlete you don't normally see there. He's really gifted. I do think he's a pretty good blitzer. I think he's not as bad in run defense as people say. I know that like the ratings are, he's been like bottom 5 for the past like 4 years. I get that, but I do think that most of what happened to him and why he's getting such low ratings is that he will overshoot gaps. He will overplay the game. He'll overrun the actual like blocking scheme. He's got to get a little better there. Some of the aggression, I think, catches up to him at times. With that said, I do think that he's a willing player. He's willing to get down there and he's athletically gifted enough to be a problem in that feature of the game. Coverage, like I said, guys, I do think there's some limitations in his ability to cover. I mean, look, they're rolling the dice here. I mean, there's not a lot risked here, right? You can say that it's not like the money's insignificant, but it's up to. You get what I'm saying, guys? It's up to $7.5 million. So that clearly tells us there's some incentive-based stuff there. So it's 1 year. They're not like overly committed to this guy. It's definitely like a prove it deal. I don't know that, look, I would have definitely preferred some guys earlier on in the cycle. I'm not going to sit here and change my perspective on that. But I get what they're trying to do. Chop, Reddick, and Huff would be spooky. Thoughts on CJ coming back, and do you think he can help Bradbury get back into form? I think he can allow Bradbury to play a little bit more aggressive underneath because he knows that he's going to have a guy with the athletic ability to carry on the back end over top of him. So, I mean, in that regards, I think you'll see him probably be a little bit more risky, use his length, his size a little bit more, if he's even here. I mean, that's the first thing is like, we got to see who's here once camp ends and we get into that week, when they're setting up for week 1. But I think there's some reason to say like, oh no, like he's going to be able to play a little bit more loosely. He's going to be able to use that size advantage a little bit more, and him getting beat a little bit when he gambles, probably not going to be as big a deal when you got a guy like CJ back there that can carry with him. But you got to watch teams, man. Teams are going to try to isolate him, even if he is, even if we're playing quarters to that side. Like say we're playing cover 6, right? Teams are going to probably try to make you commit quarters to Bradbury's side instead of the half side, right? They're going to want you to play that quarter side to his side, so that way that they can try to isolate and keep CJ Gardner-Johnson preoccupied to try to isolate on James Bradbury. Sorry, guys, I need a drink. I like Austin Watkins, Mearslime. I think he's a fast guy. He's a lot of foot speed. It's a Quez Watkins type player. They love that speed from they love that vertical slot, that speed from the vertical slot. I wish they would concern themselves with more of a space guy, a guy that can operate and play in space, can take advantage of the space that basically AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, create. But, we'll have to see. I mean, it's a new offensive coordinator. They saw the way teams played us last year. Maybe Nick comes back out of this and goes, you know what? That worked when teams were playing us this way, but teams aren't playing us that way. Like we've got to find a way of getting single high and being able to even use that speed to take advantage of teams. So hopefully there's some, some thought process that goes into this in terms of the way that they structure whoever's going to be that third receiver, that slot guy. And I know that they're going to, it's not really truly a slot. They're probably looking for a guy that can carry as a slot, can play outside, all those things. They're hard to find, though. Those aren't easy to find, especially for backup players. Devin White is the middle. Haason Reddick and Nolan Smith is outside linebackers. Well, the way it's going to work is you're going to have 2 inside backers, Rex Real TV. So it'll be probably right now, and obviously there's still more time to go. So we'll have to see once everything is finalized in terms of all the moves are made. But right now, you would assume that it would be Devin White playing what we would call the right inside linebacker defensively. And then Nakobe Dean will be the left inside linebacker, which normally, offenses can dictate this, but it's normally your Mike linebacker in that system. And then you have your overhangs. In the 34, it's still, guys, it's no different than what you've seen. It's not going to be some drastically different. Where the differences will be down on the defensive line. So your overhangs are still going to play the same role. They're not going to drop a guy into coverage 300 times in terms of the overhangs. You'll get guys that'll drop probably over the course of a season 120 to 150-ish, 120, 150 snaps, and they're mostly dropping to the flats, guys. I mean, this is not, I wouldn't overly concern myself with where they're dropping. It's more so that they mix it up. They mix it up so it's not obvious when and where we're dropping the players, so that way they know that they have an easy rush coming. So ideally, what I would like to see Rex Real TV in that situation is when they drop, Nolan Smith into the flats, when they drop Haason Reddick into the flats, when they drop a Bryce Huff into the flats, that something is coming from the others from the field here, right? Now you got a Nakobe Dean, you got a Devin White, you got somebody else, let's say they go and they get Edrin Cooper. You got somebody else coming. Like you're replacing it and you're still bringing a 4-man pressure. It's just that they don't know where the 4th guy's coming from now. I would hope that's what they do when they drop those guys. But I wouldn't get overly worked up about that, guys, because you're still talking about a handful of drops a game. You're not talking about big numbers. I think Zach and Rick should be good. Zach was showing flashes in the preseason before he got hurt, and Ricks wasn't really getting shine in the slot. He was more on the outside. Yeah, you're talking about Zach McPherson. Yeah, he'll be interesting. We'll have to see where he is coming off that. Wasn't it an ACL, Mearsline? Am I wrong in that? I thought he had an ACL during the preseason, but hopefully he's, it's a lot of time to heal, so hopefully he's back. But yeah. Max Melton is similar to CJ GJ, a lot of similarities, Gate. Huh. Then I'm interested. I want to see a little bit more and see how I get a feel there, because if he's going to play like CJ, I think what makes CJ kind of special, if you will, in terms of the way he plays the game is that CJ Gardner-Johnson, he will freelance, but when he freelances, he normally comes up with something pretty spectacular. So, I think those kind of guys are valuable, because if you got a Max Melton and you got a CJ Gardner-Johnson type on your team, what you got there is flexibility between nickel and safety. I like when you can get these type of flexible players, personally. I love how Howie is exactly. Easy said, Gate, any idea why Howie made an exception for Barkley? Was this for Kellen Moore's scheme? Do they view Barkley as our CMC? I think your assumptions are right. I don't know if they think that sorry guys, let me turn the light on here. I don't know if they think he's an apples for apples comparison to CMC, but he's CMC in the regards that he can run the ball, he can catch the ball in the backfield, and he can pick up a blitz. So he's legitimately a 3-down back, if you will. So I think that's what they saw in him. I do think that part of it is probably because Kellen Moore probably wanted the player, probably said that if you put this guy in my offense, I can do things with him. They got to use him, though. They need to use the young man, because we spent a little money here. This guy can be dynamic, especially if this offensive line is what we think it's going to be. I know Kelsey's a big miss, guys. I'm not going to try to underplay the fact that Kelsey's not on the team no more, but I got to be honest, man. He could be a problem, because we were talking about earlier about trying to get guys out of too high. You're not going to go light box on the Eagles if they got Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts back there handling the football. That's a problem. If you're going, too high and you're only putting 6 in the box, and we get +1 on you in the running game with Hurts and Barkley, that's a problem, right? Now you're starting to creep down. You're trying to play Hurts. You're trying to play Barkley. You're giving us opportunities on the outside to beat you. So I think that's what they're looking at is that domino, that chess piece. They're definitely, this is Super Bowl or bust, easy. Howie's definitely pushing his chips in. Was it the Texas tight end, JT Sanders? I went in badly, but most Eagle fans aren't trying to hear it. Kid is nice. I love how Howie is going out there before the draft, getting the majority of the pieces. Now in the draft, the players will be depth pieces and players that will fill spots great. Yeah, from the top to the bottom of the roster. Yeah, I agree with you, Marquette. That's the way they should be doing it, right? I like it when Howie's in his bag. When Howie's out there, that basically saying, everyone says, oh, the Eagles can't afford this player. They won't be able to do that. And Howie's just okay, watch this. We'll snatch this player. We're going to snatch this player. We're going to snatch this player. That's when he's in his, he's in the zone. You all see all the tweets? I know some of you guys you don't get on Twitter. I don't blame you. But if you watch all the tweets recently, I thought it was really funny how you could see some of the frustrated fan bases that are not familiar with Howie, how they kept tweeting out, how is he doing this? How does he still have money? How is this even possible? And it's welcome to Howie Roseman. Davon said, what's up, Gate? How you feel about picking up White and Saquon? Devin White's an interesting one to me just because we don't know what he's going to be, but it's a low risk, high reward type deal. He's a 1 year up to $7.5 million. They need a depth. Simply put, guys, we need bodies at linebacker. I don't really know what we want them to do. I think they tried early on to get a couple different names. I think the market got a little too expensive, and I think they just kind of fell back towards, Devin White. I think that there is some athleticism to why he's here. Because I got a lot of people ask me about Dodson, because Dodson had a really good year for Buffalo. And I thought he'd be a pretty good player for Philly too, but I think there must be something to the speed element, right? That speed that, White can give to the defense. I think they got factored in. I think that got weighed in a little bit. What's up, Mr. Sandman? How you doing, bro? Yeah, Sanders will allow us to play 12 and learn from Goddard. I appreciate that, man. Says you're a good man for helping your family. I try, man. I try my best. Lane himself said he's playing until his contract runs out. He signed through the 2026 season. Yeah, but you know what I'm saying, Easy. He's already dealt and battled with those things before, and he could feel that way at the end of one year and maybe not feel that way at the end of another. I'm always a little iffy. I mean, I would love to have Lane stay here as long as he possibly can play the game. I mean, the guy's he's not going to be easy to replace. I mean, that's going to be a really tough job for whoever steps in next. What's up, Gay? How you doing, Drew? Giants just got sour grapes. What's up, Bailey? How you doing, man? Did you see the combine? Every linebacker was running 4.5 40s and were built like a track athlete. The NFL is seriously changing. Yeah, a lot of hybrid players now, Mr. Sandman, where you're seeing these guys that years ago would have been a running back, probably. Yeah, you definitely got some speed guys. I mean, like I told you, Mr. Sandman, I said on a live stream here that I was hearing that Peyton Wilson was going to run a sub 4.45, and I laughed. I know Peyton. I've seen this guy on the field before. I'm like, he's athletic as crap, but I mean, if you said he was going to run like a 4.48 into like the 4.52 range, I'm like, yeah, that seems about right. When they said sub 4.45, I was like, come on, man. And he went out there and he did it. So shout out to him, man. These dudes are athletic, man. We were talking about Cooper earlier, Mr. Sandman. That dude he's an athletic freak too. I like the young man that's out there for UTEP. He's going to be a late round pick. You're definitely talking about probably a day 3 pick, but Tyrese Knight from UTEP, another one he got some athleticism to him. Mr. Sandman said, I love that question, Mr. Sandman. Who would you give the green dot to, Dean or White? Oh, I'd probably give it to Nakobe because he's probably going to be the mic in this system. I want White to play freely. And I know you can make the same case. Like, shouldn't we allow Nakobe younger? Shouldn't he be the guy that we try to free up and not burden down with the responsibility of calling plays and making adjustments on the field? But I just feel like Nakobe's going to be a better fit to it. And I think that White's athleticism is something you want to play very freely. I think that's where you can get the most out of his use, Mr. Sandman. But they could also go in a safety room. They could have one of their safeties call the plays. So they could have the green dot too. We'll have to see. That's an excellent question. Because I could see cases being made all over the board. What's up, Linda? Thank you for the $20 super chat. If Jerome Baker makes it out of Tennessee's interview, I think the Eagles grab him as insurance. You think they're going to keep stacking like veteran players to bring in for stack linebacker? Yeah, I could see that. Especially like if you're really looking at like, if you're saying like, look, Zack Baun's going to be a hybrid player and I think they're going to use him a lot as an overhang on the edges, then yeah, Linda, I think you might have a point that they're not quite done. They might draft and still sign and bring in a veteran player. I mean, that's definitely could be a real possibility. Troy said, prayers up for you and the family. Thank you, guys. I appreciate y'all. Tebow. Interesting name, sir. Peyton Wilson is a stud, big, fast, athletic guy. He's all over the field, makes plays consistently. I saw it firsthand. So did I. When I saw him, I wanted him immediately in Philly. Dude can play. Yeah. Yeah, he's a really good player. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, if you liked Drake Thomas last year as an undrafted free agent, Peyton Wilson is a more athletic version of Drake Thomas. And of course, Drake Thomas is, he's got family in the NFL. His little brother, I think, still on NC State. Drake's little brother, I think, still playing for State. And then his older brother, All right, checking. Can you all hear me? Can you guys hear me now? I'm sorry, guys. It did tell me earlier, like I saw the light went off on it, but I thought I got it back working. Yeah, I see that, man. 447 of y'all. I appreciate y'all, guys. All right. If it mutes again, guys, I'll just unplug it. I don't like the inboard speakers. Sometimes the inboard speakers, like, it can pick up weird sound frequencies. So, like, I try not to do that. I appreciate you guys for alerting me. Eventually, I started noticing, like, as I was scrolling down to see how far the chat is, I started noticing there were super chats. So that tipped me off. Hold up, because I don't even know. Linda, I don't even know if you heard me when I did this, because I think it was right around this time. So let me make sure I cover my bases on some of you guys that were asking questions. If Jerome Baker makes it out of Tennessee's interview, I think the Eagles grab him as insurance. Yeah, I agree. I think so as well. I think that you could definitely look at an off-ball linebacker still being a need. Yeah, guys, I could go back and take a look. Let me see. Oh, man, some of the bigger ticket items. Hold up, guys. Let me go up. All right. This is what I'll do. We'll start from here, guys, okay? We'll start from here. I'm going to come down to where Drew is. All right? We'll start from here. I'll stay a little longer because I know we've been going an hour and 45 minutes, but this was technically my fault because I did see it muted. I thought I fixed it. I should have checked the chat. That was on me. So let's try again. All right. If you got a burning question you want me to answer, and I was pulling them up and I was answering it and I didn't get to it, I'll give you guys a few minutes to re-ask that question and I'll answer it for you again. My bad, guys. I'm sorry. Anybody here, Rip Leader? That's funny, bro. Okay, I think this is a good one until we get some people coming back in here. All right, guys. Let's start off here with talking about the linebackers, all right? Because I think we were kind of picking up on this point a little bit. So we were talking about the roles of, like, I know a lot of you guys were asking me about Devin White and the signing of Devin White, what I think about Devin White, and then kind of like a lot of you guys were asking me how I think they'll structure things in terms of Devin White, Nakobe Dean, and like kind of like how I see that off-ball linebacker position going, like who's going to have the green dot of play calling, essentially who will be the mic, who's going to play more so towards the weak side. I think that opinionated, guys. It's opinionated until they get in camp. Nobody really knows until we're in camp, okay? But I do think that what you could see here is the Nakobe being the green dot of play calling, just because, like, I think that you want a guy of Devin White's athletic ability to be freed up. You don't want him bogged down by having to call the plays, shifting the defense, all that stuff. I think Nakobe's probably better suited for that role. And then you got Devin, who's kind of going to play that rangy role, who's going to be the guy that, you know, like Nakobe's responsibility is to set those blocks up, follow them up, get through that, and then shut it down. But if they bounce outside, then you need that range, you need that speed, and Devin White to close that off on the outside. So I think that's how they'll go. But what I was saying earlier when I muted myself, in a comical standpoint here, guys, is that I think one of the things you could see is that they could technically defer this to the safety group. So let's say that Reed Blankenship moves over and he plays the strong side. So Reed becomes a strong safety. Gardner Johnson is going to be kind of that free safety that's freelancing, right? They could give Reed the green dot of play calling. They could do something like that. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be a linebacker. So one of those situations, guys, to where we'll have to see once they get in camp with that one. But I know a lot of you guys were asking me about the Mike linebacker as well, so that kind of fits into it. I think that they're probably going to go with Nakobe Dean as the Mike. the movement-based skills and what they do. I think Nakobe's better suited for it than Devin. But, I mean, we'll have, like I said, guys, it's all guesswork until we're in camp. I just think Devin's going to play better with playing in space like that. All right, let's see what we got, guys. Of course, I hate when it does this. There's so many chats that come in at a certain point, it won't even let you. Everybody's. Okay, we're all back here. I'm trying to find questions, guys. All right, Antonio said, evaluation of Brandon Dorless. I have a first-round grade on him. I was saying I'll take a look at his film for you. Here's the thing when it comes to these edge rushers, depending on the scheme in which the team's going to play, you're talking about drastically different body frames, body types. You have to know where guys are picking and where the evaluation is of the player. And then from there, you got to take a look at like their testing numbers and stuff like that and get the data historically of where these guys have been drafted. Let me take a look at those things, Antonio, and I'll give you a real assessment on exactly where I think the range is he's going to get drafted. I would assume what you're saying is you think there's a chance that he could slip potentially into the end of the first round, into that upper range of the second round. Is that what you're basically saying? The Chris and Drew questions, guys, that is way up there. If they re-ask them again, guys, I'll answer them. But that's like way up there. I'd have to really try to find those. What's up, Dante? How you doing, buddy? Richie MC said, quarterback factory, would Hallie be out of his mind to trade for Justin Fields with a third-round pick to be Hurts's backup and a possible trade asset in the 2025 season? Out of his mind? No. I mean, I don't know that the Eagles are in the market at third-round value for a backup quarterback, but Richie, I mean, they've done crazier things, to be quite honest. I think if you reach a situation to where, I mean, nobody is trading for this guy and they start dipping into day 3 value, possibly. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to factor that one. I don't buy into a lot of people are like, oh, don't do that because like certain members of the fan base, as soon as Jalen has a bad game, we're going to be calling for it. Like, it don't matter who the backup quarterback is. That segment of the fan base is going to do that anyways. Like, it don't matter who that quarterback is. So that doesn't move the needle for me. I don't care about that part of it. But, I mean, we saw that they were willing to try to get in the Joe Flacco mix. So they clearly are unsettled right now, Richie. So they're unsettled at least at that spot. With CJGJ on the squad, how do you see Blankenship's role? Blank is more of a thumper. I answered it as you were answering that. Yeah, I mean, he could get moved over. Like, he could be a backup. He could be a third safety they bring in, or they could move him over to strong. He could definitely play that strong role. Richie said, Ken Lewis's questions. Your thought on Brandon Smith. I look at his measurables and I see an edge, but I feel nobody is talking about him like that. Okay, thanks, guys. All right, I do remember answering this one too, Richie. So, all right, so I was talking about earlier in the video when we first started off, I did talk about, like, if you look at the players that are in here right now. So Haason Reddick, Bryce Huff, Nolan Smith, Julian Okwara, Patrick Johnson, even Zack Baun. We talked about Zack Baun being a hybrid player earlier, right? I think Brandon Smith fits that role. Could he probably play as an off-ball stacked backer? Sure. Do I think that's where they want him to play? I don't think so. I actually think they probably are looking at him as an overhang. We'll see once they get in camp, but I definitely think that's where they're going with it, Richie. I think they're going to try him out as an overhang. You can make the argument that there's still guys like right now, Josh Sweat is still on the roster. But as we talked about, he's one of those Florida State guys that he did stand up in college and rush. So it's not foreign for Josh Sweat. We do have guys, though, like Brandon Graham. Terrell Lewis is another one that could stand up, but has more of the prototypical size measurements, which you would expect, that 265 range from an edge rusher. But I do think that he's not a traditional hand in the dirt guy. And then Teron Jackson is kind of that hand in the dirt guy. But I think they're trying to phase those hand in the dirt guys out. I do. I think that you're seeing a new direction coming in here with Fangio. And I think that's why you see the Okwaras and the Brandon Smiths and those guys getting brought in here. They're darts at the board. I think they're really good darts at the board, but nonetheless, they're just throwing darts at the board and seeing if any of these guys stick for the deep roster, right? So you're talking about maybe that 5th or 6th guy in a rotation, if you will, right? Unless something happens. Maybe they look at these guys and say, you know what, we can get these guys on a really good, favorable contract onto the practice squad underneath the veteran rules and keep them around. I definitely could see some stuff there. I could see that being the case there. What's up, Justin? How you doing, bro? Does Nolan Smith play more off-ball? Bryce Huff put Nolan in that draft bus conversation. I don't know. I mean, Dante, you can make the case they could play him as a hybrid player, but I think they see him more as an overhang. But I mean, we'll have to see once they get in there. You can certainly make the case that he's got the movement abilities of an off-ball linebacker, that he can come up. You can play Bryce Huff off one of the overhangs, right? One of the edges. And then you can play Haason Reddick on the other. And then you take a guy like Nolan Smith and you put him over the A or B gap and you let him use that athleticism to get through. You can make a lot of the same arguments I made about Zack Baun. You could say the same thing for Nolan Smith, right? A lot of things I said about Edger and Cooper and I said about Tyrese Knight. You could say the same thing for Nolan Smith. Some of you guys say you got a 3rd-round grade on him. Chop from Penn State. I was talking earlier. Dang, you guys missed that whole spiel on the drafting, huh? So they were asking me about edge rushers in terms of the draft. And I said, my viewpoint on edge rushers is this, guys. It's not an immediate need per se. We have a lot. Like right now, Josh Sweat's still currently on the roster. So you got Haason Reddick, Bryce Huff, right? Nolan Smith. You got Josh. Well, we said Josh. You have Brandon Graham, right? Patrick Johnson's still here. Julian Okwara and Brandon Smith and Terrell Lewis. Like there's a lot of guys here. Zack Baun can get involved on the edge. So you can make that case that right now that's not really a big need for the 24 season. Most of these dudes are not on long-term contracts. Josh Sweat is an unknown. Okwara is not on a long-term contract. Brandon Smith's not on a long-term contract. Patrick Johnson, I think, is coming up on the last year of his contract. Graham is probably his last year in the league. Terrell Lewis is not on a long-term contract. Teron Jackson is not on a long-term contract. So, I mean, when you really look at it, you got Haason Reddick, you got Bryce Huff, you got Nolan Smith. Even Zack Baun, I think, only signed a 1-year deal. So, I mean, you can make a case that there's a long-term need at edge rusher. And that's kind of where we entered the conversation about Chop Robinson and kind of where I saw him. And what I was saying is like for me, when I look at the potential of the draft, a lot of you guys are really high on Dallas Turner. I didn't put a lot of film and time into Dallas Turner because I think he's a top 12 pick. Doesn't mean he's going to go top 12, guys. I mean, I've thought a lot of guys before were going to be top 12 picks, which is normally where you say like the blue books of the draft, those blue bloods, if you will. But sometimes it doesn't always work out. But I will say that I think he's in that range. So then we were talking about Jarrett Verse. Jarrett Verse, I think, is in that same range of Florida State pass rushers, right? The Brian Burns, the Josh Sweats, those type of guys. These big, longer players that have incredible wingspans and reach. They're very athletically gifted. They can play standing up or they can play in a wide 9 type system. Jarrett Verse is an interesting guy to me. Who else? We talked about a few different people, guys. Leitu. I think that's how you say his name, guys. I'm probably saying that wrong, but the UCLA edge rusher guy that I think definitely you can make a case that is kind of that taller than Bryce Huff, but around that, Bryce Huff is 255. This kid's around 260-ish. You can make a case that he fits kind of the mold if he's there. Because you're looking at what's the best player available at 22. And then you got Chop Robinson, right? And then I brought up an interior defensive lineman in Byron Murphy. So what I was saying is, let's say the value's not there for what they want in terms of the interior offensive line or the tackles, right? So offensive line, it's not there for what they want at 22. Okay. They don't like the names. They think 22 is an overdraft for them, right? And let's say that the corners go higher than they expect. I really think that we're in a good spot to land one of the corners, because I do think once you get past pick 16, of course, corners will go in the top 12 picks, guys. I mean, no doubt we've seen that happen before. But those are normally very, very elite level players. A lot of your corners you start seeing with first round grades start happening past the top half of the first round. Like right around that pick 16 mark to the back half of the first round is where you start seeing those corners come off the board. So in the situation where we just can't get in position for 3 of the names we have on the board, so we'd either have to trade backwards to get into the second range of corners, or we got to move forward and we can't get a trading partner. So offensive line, cornerbacks are off the board. Let's say the Eagles are just not going to take an Edgerrin Cooper. They're not going to take a Peyton Wilson in the first round. Okay. I'm not saying that they will or won't, guys. I'm not, I don't know. I know it's not, they haven't done that in a very, very long time, guys. I think the last time we drafted a linebacker in the first round was like 1979. A true off-ball stacked linebacker when I say that, guys. I don't mean like the Nolan Smith type. I'm not talking about like an overhang. I think that's where you get into the conversation. Like if those players aren't available, then I think you have to look for what's your best player available on the board. And like, does somebody fall further than we think? Like a Jarrett Verse, does he fall further than what we thought? Letu, is he still there at 22, right? I mean, Chop Robinson, I think you're in range at 22. It makes sense to me, right? You take a look at, like I was talking about earlier, Byron Murphy, interior defensive lineman. Like those could be legitimately the best players on the board at 22 if you're staying put. But I also think you got to consider like Cooper DeJean too. Like I think if you take Cooper DeJean and you see him as a safety and not a corner, then I think he's in the mix. I think that's where, maybe you take a stab at adding even more to that secondary. It's going to be interesting, man. Yeah, Justin, I put out some tweets on Twitter. I actually talked about this when I muted myself, ironically, guys. But yeah, I did put out some tweets where I thought that he was being a little underrated in this cycle. I thought his film was really good at the end of the year, Justin. And I'm kind of shocked he hasn't gotten as much interest as I thought he was going to get. I thought, I don't know, I can't say Fangio. And to me, it seems like they wanted the athleticism, Justin. And that's what they coveted here. So I thought that for me, when I was originally looking at it, I thought Willie Gay would have been a really good pickup for them. I thought he fit in terms of like the athletic profile and like what you could kind of expect there. I really liked, what's his name? The young man from the Titans originally. I can't, his name's slipping on my mind. It's Al Aziz. What was it? Al Aziz. What was his name? The Titans linebacker. He was another one that I thought would have been a good fit in Philly. I can't think of his name right now. It's like, he had like a hyphenated name, I think. But like, he was a really good player when I was watching his film. I was like, oh, he would fit in Philly. Like, I thought they wanted those kind of speed guys. You know what I mean? So I was like, oh, okay, like, I think that's what they're looking for. I mean, they got Devin White, who is a speed guy, but I think we're all, a little up in the air, right? I mean, it's not a lot invested there. I mean, up to $7.5 million, but it's a 1-year deal. So, I mean, they're not like overly tied to this player. We'll see. I mean, I think it's just a trial thing. Like at his best, behind a defensive line that can tie up offensive linemen and keep them from climbing, he could be quite interesting to watch play. Who's CB1s? Mine's got to be Nate Wiggins. Do you prefer Terrion or Kool-Aid? I like the young man who's coming out of Toledo. When I watched this film, man, Quinion Mitchell. When I watched this film, man, I felt like this is a guy that you could play him as a boundary. You could play him as a field side corner. I originally thought I was going to go in there and just see a guy that I just thought was a field side corner. But honestly, I thought he mixed it up and got more physical receivers than I was expecting. I think the only guy I'm a little suspect of in terms of the versatility, not that he's not a good player. I'm not saying he's not a good player. I'm saying I don't know that the versatility is what I thought it was going to be, is Nate Wiggins. Nate Wiggins is a little light. He's a little light, so I'm not too sure about him playing on the boundary. I think if you get a bigger, stronger physical receiver, that Alshon Jeffrey type receiver that's not going to create a lot of separation but has strong hands, I think that's where you can get in trouble with Nate Wiggins. But I know a lot of people really like his hips. They like his ability to basically flip and run. That's a big thing with Nate Wiggins. So, I mean, we'll see. I mean, you can also make the case that like Gate, he might be a little light out the gate, but give him a year or two in the league and give him an opportunity to get inside of an NFL weight room, inside of strength and conditioning. And this is a guy that could potentially get up to like 180, 185 and that becomes a little bit less of a worry. Hard to say, man. Oh, yeah, I just saw this one out, Cameron. Yeah, I like that. That's my number one from what I saw so far. I'm not deep into the corners yet, though, Cameron, so it's a light number one right now. So far, the film I watched, like, that's the guy I came away the most impressed with so far. When does Hurts' big numbers kick in? That's a fair question. Let me take a look at his – let me see his contract structure, and I can give you exactly. So $255 million. I don't want over the cap because theirs is sometimes it's just not the best. Where's Spotrac? I don't even see Spotrac. Where is it? There it is. So 24, he's got a yearly cash flow of $40 million. His cap hits 13. He kicks up to $21 million next year, guys. Now there might be, we got to be careful because sometimes there's option bonus stuff. So now that is including the option bonus. 26. In 26, he jumps up to about $31.7 million in terms of the cap because he has a $25.6 million option bonus. This is somewhat similar. The numbers are bigger than Carson Wentz's, but the structure is kind of similar to what we have for Carson Wentz in terms of like the option bonuses being where that money is invested. So I would take a wild guess that if you're going to see restructure, guys, it'll come after the 25 season before 26 kicks in because that's where that option money hits the $26 million. So that's where you might see them come back to the table and potentially do something else. But that's where he finally climbs over 30 million. I mean, his numbers are still pretty. I mean, I think what they're hoping is that it paces because by the time you hit 27, guys, the figure climbs to 45 million, 45.8 in terms of the cap hit. 28, the cap hit's 54 million. So I think 26 is where you probably see that 26 season is probably where you would see like some movement happen. Like that's where the numbers start to kind of like where you probably see if there's going to be a restructure, a renegotiation, a contract. Like I think that's where you'd see it kind of come into play. Certainly before 27. I think so. Would you do a Haason and or Sweat for Patrick Surtain? Sweat? I said Sweat. Sweat, yes. That's funny. Sweat for Surtain. I hate to see Sweat go because I actually like Sweat. I don't think he's a bad player. I think he had a down year. I think the Eagles are a little mad that he was kind of freelancing towards the end of the year. But if I got a chance to get Patrick Surtain, I'm probably going to take it. To be honest, Dante, I probably would make the deal. We were talking a little bit earlier, Justin. I appreciate the question, man. So essentially the update on it is that she has a desire to eat, so she's eating. But the problem is when they bottle feed her. So right now she's at about like 62 milliliters. When they bottle feed her, she aspirates because like there's a whole like I said, guys, this is the first time I've had to, raise an infant. I've never, when her sister, my niece came to live with us, she was already like 9 years old. So, Alana being 8 weeks old, this is completely new territory for me. But she's aspirating because like there's this process of like they're supposed to suck, swallow, then breathe. But she's so excited to eat. Unfortunately, it's not making it down, from what I understand, the esophagus correctly. It's kind of getting stuck, and then it causes her to start aspirating, or sometimes it's not even getting into the esophagus. I think it's getting into her actual airway at times. So they're a little concerned that without putting a G tube in, I think the problem with aspirating and having that happen is it can develop, like over time, that can lead to like pneumonia. So they're a little concerned about that. So right now that's the plan, guys, is they're gonna put the G tube in. So we'll definitely get to, I'll have an update as soon as I know, like when they get everything is scheduled and like I know when she's coming home, she'll be rocking with us on one of these live streams. Okay, City, I'm excited about the change. Yeah, I am too, Unspoken. I'm excited to see something new. Can go for Surtain, Dante. Watching Devin White tape, and he can't tackle. His pursuit angles are bad sometimes, Paul. It's what I was talking about earlier. I don't know if I muted myself when I was talking about this, but I don't think his tackling is as bad as people are saying, Paul. But I think the problem he gets himself into with tackling is he's an aggressor. He's an aggressor. He will shoot the gaps on you, but his pursuit angles will be off at times, and then he's out of position trying to make a play, and then you're getting a lot of arm stuff. You're getting a lot of these arm tackle stuff, and people are running through him at times when he does that. That's why I think he's better suited not to play that Mike role, Paul, and to play more of the kind of that will. They're both stacked, backers in this role, but we'll see, man. I mean, he's on a prove it deal. He's got to prove it. I got a feeling Vic Fangio is going to use Nolan Smith as an off-ball linebacker. We'll see. I mean, once they get in camp, that's what I'm saying, guys. I don't want to go on the record like too strongly one way or the other because like there's reason to look at some of these hybrid players and say like, I wonder what Fangio does. You know what I mean? Like we talked about Zack Baun earlier, hybrid player. You know what I mean? Like you got guys like Julian Okwara and Brandon Smith. You've got some, Patrick Johnson. You got some unique body types here. So we'll see. I don't think Patrick Johnson doesn't give me the he doesn't give me the sideline to sideline movement that what we call like kind of the lateral movement ability that I normally see out of a linebacker, but he did look like he was in better shape at the beginning of camp last year. So I would love to see a real evaluation of him because I think he's got an uphill battle to make it as an edge this year, as an overhang. I think that might be a little tough for Patrick Johnson. But yeah, I mean, striker, I mean, that's Shrieker, my bad. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Like, who are the hybrid players that we might be misassigning their alignment? It's possible. In my opinion, Nolan Smith measurables definitely can be used as an off-ball linebacker, but from the little I've seen from others' film, he doesn't do anything particularly well. Perhaps let him freestyle off the off-ball position. In my opinion, probably not popular. Glad you're back, brother. We missed you. Hey, man, I appreciate that, Mr. No Name. It's all good, Drew. Drew, if you put out enough opinions, someone's not going to agree with it. I can tell you that. Straightforward as a content creator. Oregon's Brandon Dolores ran a 4.85 40, 6'3", 283, 40-yard dash, 4.85, 10 split, 168. Arms are 33 and a quarter. Wingspans are 80, almost 81. Vertical leap, 30 and a half. Broad jump, not the most athletically gifted guy. But are you guys looking at him more as like a that Jack Stoll kind of hybrid, kind of blocking, tight end role where he's going to kind of be flexed a little bit? The modern day fullback role. I know some teams still carry a real fullback. Most teams don't. Is that kind of the role you guys are thinking of with him? Or get one of the cornerbacks from Alabama. You're talking Kool-Aid. Fernie said, I like Ringo. Oof. Richie said, will Gainwell excel with Barkley on the team? Is this the end of Boston Scott's time on the Eagles? Yeah, he signed with no, he didn't sign. Or did he? Did he sign with the Giants, guys? I thought Boston signed with the Giants. Maybe he was just meeting with them. I might want to let me check that, Richie, before I say that he did, but I know he was at least meeting and considering signing with the Giants. As it stands, is this roster closer to 22 or 23 or better than both defensively? Ooh, Eric, that's a dang good question, man. It depends on what happens at corner. Eric, that's a really good question. I think it's somewhere between 22 and 23. I don't think it's quite what 23's was. I think we're shoring up more holes than we did in 23. I don't know that I feel as comfortable as I did in 22, but there's still time. That's the thing, Eric, right? It's like we're not a finished product yet. So I think we're like somewhere in between those two in terms of the defense. We got things to answer here, man. James Bradbury and Darius Slay, they got to be a big part of what happens here. Like either they're not going to be on the team and those positions aren't filled yet, and then we got to reevaluate, or those dudes are on the team and they got to play like big-time players. Like that could, like we don't know what's going on at nickel. We talked about, a Cooper DeJean or a CJ Gardner-Johnson type kind of coming in. Here's the safeties that flex as the nickel corner and being able to move around and play those guys off of each other. We talked about Isaiah Rodgers having that. He's a field corner, guys. He's like Slay. He's a field corner. So a lot of those field corners have that ability. They have those underlying measurables that give you the movement ability of a nickel corner. But where you have to make the assessment is can they play through traffic? The difference is when you play field, you're playing space. Sometimes as a nickel, you're going to play space because a lot of times you're towards the field side too, but you're not outside of that guy normally. But sometimes guys are not comfortable playing inside of like that congested area of the field where you've got to work through stuff, moving pieces and parts and knowing that you're going to be all up in the mix of things. Like some guys don't do that very well. They're not very good at it. So like if you look at it Isaiah Rodgers, like if you're going to project him to slide in at nickel because he has the movement ability, just not the experience, I think that question has to be answered is can he play through, can he play through traffic like that? To be fair, Avonte Maddox was originally an outside cornerback at Pittsburgh too. So you can make the case that, Maddox had to basically do the same thing. He just did it from college into the pros. You guys think it might be better than 22? Coach, what up, my guy? Are you doing in mock drafts? Good to see you. Hey, what's up, Drew? Yeah, I'm going to do some mock drafts, guys. We're going to do a couple of them. I want to do one to where I just want the board to fall to us and we don't move, and then we can assess what's happening. Let the board fall to us, and then if we can never predict how the draft's going to fully go, but if the draft laid out this way, what would I do, right? What I hate about all these draft simulators is sometimes they're just really unreasonable, and it's just so easy to really pick talent because like they're just really just overvaluing certain guys, and I think that sometimes they can be a little unrealistic, but nonetheless, we'll still play the game of like, this is what, if the board fell this way, this is what we would do. And then we can do one to where like, if we move forward, move backwards, moving around, how would we do this? And then we'll just do one like, this is what we think Howie's going to do. We can set up 3 of them. We'll do straight up, stay still. How would you pick? We know how he's going to move at some point. So then we'll do like Howie averages like 2 to 3 trades per draft. So we can do, that kind of version, and we'll do what we think is going to happen. Those are always fun. It's always fun to see like where we find out later on the Eagles had interest but just didn't get a chance to get the guy. And then like where we were just way off, like the Eagles showed no interest in that player at all. Like those are always interesting to see where the fan base, content creators, the fan base, and like the front office where we're at odds at each other. I wanted Cam Curl and he was obtainable. Yeah, Cam Curl's a good player. Thank you, Matthew. That's exactly what I was thinking of, man. Thank you, Matthew. Exactly what I was thinking of. It was driving me crazy because I'm like, yo, I know this person's name. I know it's a hyphenated name. I know it starts with an A. What is this dude's name? But yeah, that's what I was thinking was Al Shahir, I think, was one of those guys, Willie Gay, Devin White. I think they wanted more of those movement type guys. Those speed guys. Yo, Gate, my man, glad to see you and hear from you again. What's up, Aishan? How you doing, buddy? From what I heard, Hurts cap is locked in for no more than 10% of the cap. Yeah, it doesn't really accelerate, guys. And like I said, until the 26th season, it kicks up to 31.7 million. Mind you, guys, they're trying to keep. So they may not negotiate 26 contract, but I do think 27 and 28 is where you might see that because it's 45.8 and 54.1. The game you play as a GM here is to try to keep pace with the increases in the salary cap off the TV revenue to where some of that you can just absorb that cap hit and it doesn't affect you to what people think because TV revenues are bringing up the cap every year. That's the game they're playing, right? I mean, from what I saw them do in 2021, guys, where they were 90, at one point in 2021, we were 90-some million over the cap. I want to say it was like 92 or 93 exactly. Then we went down to like 70-something and it came down. That's when I first met LB because like everyone was panicking about the cap. And I went on LB's show to explain to him, like, I can't tell you word for word what they're going to do, but I can show you where the money's at to be moved. Like, these are the players that are up for negotiations. What's going to happen here? I talked about Alshon. I talked about Malik Jackson. I talked about all these moves that would happen. Carson, how they would eat the dead cap in a way that would work. And then I talked about the June 1st designations. I was walking everyone through, like, these are the players with big cap numbers. So when you're looking at this, the base salaries, this is where money can be negotiated. That's when I first met LB, and I was telling LB like how they would do that in 21. Like, I've seen what Howie can do. I never fear the cap with Howie. That guy is really freaking good at doing things, man. He figures it out, man. Finally, where you been? What's good, Nambi? How you doing, buddy? What do you think about Moore's system? Kellen Moore, interested to see how he uses the running backs, Fernie. I think that the way that they adjust to pressure on third down is going to be interesting. Those are the big areas I'm looking for. Utilization of the running backs, and then what do they do with pressure? Like, I don't think that some of the concepts I've seen him run are like drastically different from what we've done here, but those are the two areas. I think you see more targets to running backs. I think you see a little bit more in terms of read where the blitz is coming from, replace that defender on an overload with the football to that side. I think you're going to see a simplification of how you beat pressure from Kellen Moore's system. Philly 0024, what's up, buddy? Says, who do you think we are targeting in the draft in the first round? I really think we might draft tackle with how stacked this class is with them, especially a guy like Latham or Mims. There was I think they had a top 30 visit with the young man from Oklahoma. Is that Guyton, I believe, guys, is Lane Johnson's boy. I don't think you're that far off. I do think that adding to the offensive line is, you're talking about the Eagles, you're talking about the Eagles front office, you're talking about Howie Roseman. I think that's a very safe bet. I do think there's some reason to suspect that they might try to target corner or secondary help early on in the first round. It's just a matter of who's going to be there. That's a hard thing to predict, guys. Is 22 is kind of no man's land. I'm saying this knowing Justin Jefferson was the 22nd pick, but it is a little bit of no man's land between, do you want to trade up and target a player? Do you want to trade back and play value? Or do you think you can stay put and identify, like, either one of these secondary players are going to fall to us, we're going to be in prime position to get an offensive lineman, or, you know what, I like what we can get along, the interior defensive line, right? I like a Byron, what's his name? Is it Byron Murphy, guys, or Young? I can't, the young man from Texas. I always confuse his name. Make sure I say this young man's name. Byron Murphy II from Texas. Can you get a Byron Murphy II, to go alongside of like Jordan Davis and, Jalen Carter and Milton Williams? Like, that would just be a dynamic interior pass rush. And that young man can stop the run as well. So I think it's really important to keep our linebackers clean. So I wouldn't be shocked by a move like that. We talked about, we have a lot of depth, or a lot of perceived depth at the outside overhangs right now, but a lot of these guys are uncertain past this year. So like we talked about, like, what happens if, a guy like Dallas Turner from Alabama starts to fall down the draft. Say he gets out of the top 10. Would the Eagles be crazy enough to try to get up 12 spots for him, 10 spots for him, right? Would they try to make their way up to go get him? We talked about Jarrett Verse, that prototypical Florida State edge, very much in the Brian Burns and the Josh Sweat type, Florida State type edge. These big, strong, athletically gifted guys that can play as an overhang. They can stand up. They can also play as a wide nine. That they can be those speed guys. They have normally a lot of good reach, a lot of wingspan to them. I think Jarrett Verse kind of fits in that category of those Florida State rushers. We talked about Latu from UCLA. There's somebody else we talked about, guys. Oh, Chop Robinson. I almost forgot my guy Chop. We talked about Chop Robinson being potentially at it, right? So, I mean, I think if you're the Eagles, what you want them to do is get the best player available. You want them to set the draft up so that way there's not a glaring need, a hole you have to fill, so you can absolutely take the best player that's available. No one should be complaining about tackling after last year. Vic Fangio, it's an interesting question there, Cameron, to be honest. I'm kind of partial towards the kid that's from Toledo. I'm not saying that Wiggins is a bad player, and I think it depends if you're looking at replacing the field side, and then you're just going to basically take, like, say you're going to put Wiggins on the field side after Slay, and then you're going to take why am I blanking here, guys? The young man from Georgia we drafted last year. You're going to flip him over to play the boundary as a boundary corner. Then sure, I could see some reasoning for that. But if you're going to keep things copacetic as they are, then I think like a Quinion Mitchell gives you a lot of flexibility because he can play boundary. He could play, field side. He gives you some of the ability to play all over the place. I really like Mitchell a lot personally. I know there's a big part of our fan base that really likes Kool-Aid from Alabama. Not the tallest guy in the world, about 5'11" ish, around 200 pounds, 195, 200 pounds, plays tough, plays physical, probably could definitely play as a boundary in this league. He's an interesting guy. I like Kool-Aid. I'm not saying that he's a bad player. I think when you get past Kool-Aid is where it gets interesting, though. I think that's where you kind of have to, like, how do you feel about Rakestraw? I think Rakestraw is another guy for me where I feel like, okay, like Rakestraw could definitely be a dude that could get into the conversation. And then, of course, there's Lassiter from Georgia. You got the kid TJ Tampa from Iowa State. It gets interesting past that point, guys. I think that's the late first, the early second, I think is where you kind of have to do a little bit of homework there. You said he's a defensive end, Antonio? All right, I'm going to check him out for you, man. I got him written down. For cornerbacks, my first guys are Mitchell and Arnold, but don't think either will be there if we stay at 22. Don't like Kool-Aid. Wiggins' weight is concerning. I don't know Cooper has speed to be a cornerback in the pros. No, I have so the way I have a few of these guys stacked up, just to give you some ideas, because I'm not, like I said, guys, I'm still analyzing corners. That's going to be a couple weeks from now when I come up with that video. But I had Mitchell being a guy that could play either side. He could play as a boundary. He could definitely play as a field side corner. I have Wiggins more so as a field corner, the Darius Slade type role. I'm not saying that you couldn't put a few pounds on Wiggins and he couldn't eventually be a boundary, but he's a little light. I'm not going to lie. I think Cooper DeJean is definitely a safety in the league. I see him more as a strong safety. Kool-Aid, I think, is probably going to, you know what? That is such a good interest. For Kool-Aid, I don't think it's as cut and dry as I'm making it here in terms of where he would align. Let me see. Let me take a look at something that I think is really important to playing the field side guy, playing the boundary, and then let me compare that to what I think in terms of his ability to play field. Because your field, I need to see hips. I need to see his movement ability, because you got to be able to play in space, and that requires a certain athletic profile. The problem is a lot of these dudes aren't doing this anymore. Hang on. We do NFL Combine results.com. Kool-Aid should be pretty easy to find, guys, because, you know, not a lot. I hate when they do this, the site. Sorry, this site likes to put up these pop-up blockers on you. All right, I got to scroll all the way down here. Player search. Oh. All right, guys, Kool-Aid. All right, so yeah, I mean, the guy, he's basically 6 foot, guys. He's measured in over 5'11 and a half. So I'm gonna mark him up and say 6 foot. Yes, see, this is what I wanted to see. 32-inch arm reach, very good for a corner. Smaller hands. I don't really care too much about that in terms of corner. I don't have testing data being shown here to judge his hips. But what I was looking at is for like a sub 6 footer, like, let me see that arm reach. Let me make sure he doesn't have like closer to like 30-inch arms. Like if he's under 30-inch arms, like that's a nickel corner in my opinion. So I wanted to take a look at that. But yeah, I think like Kool-Aid, you could make a case as a boundary guy. So he would be like a James Bradbury type replacement. That's kind of the way that I see them. Let me skip down a little bit, guys. Malcolm Perry, man, I appreciate the $9.99 super chat, buddy. Gates, always having the numbers and the facts. The most factual-based Eagles content creator on the platform. Hey, man, I appreciate that, guys. Thank you so much. All right, guys, let me skim through and find a couple here. Sorry, guys, I'm skimming through to try to find a few questions here. iShine wants to talk about A.J. Brown. Yeah, we can. Let me take a look, and I'll tell you A.J. Brown contract. I'll tell you exactly where the money is laid at on the contract, and I can tell you how they would potentially work around it. Sorry, it's going to take a second because I think there's a lot of people searching contracts right now because of the free agency. So what I always look for, guys, is when I'm trying to judge the contract situations is I want to take a look and I want to see exactly where the money is on the contract. Is it an option bonus money, right? Is it escalators in the contract, like a roster bonus? So if he's on the roster at this time, you pay him this much. is this going to be base salary, something that can be converted into bonus money and then deferred down the line longer? You want to see where the money is, basically. So for AJ, $15.2 million base salary next year, which makes the potential out because that's when the dead cap, kind of gets you to where it's manageable. Yeah, I think they'll go back to the table. He's 15.2 in base salary next year, and he's 30.2 in 26. I think that following this year, you'll see news around A.J. Brown. They'll have a decision, Sean, in terms of if they want to go back to the table, extend his contract, and kick some of that freaking base salary, kick that crap down a little bit, because that'll give them a little flexibility in terms of cap figures. Do you think that the return of CJ, GJ, and whoever they pair with him, along with improved linebacker play, can help Bradbury look better? Yeah, we were kind of talking about that earlier, Eric. I don't know if I muted myself when I was doing that, but I think it can allow Bradbury to play freely. So I think he's got faith that the guy behind him has the foot speed to pick up and carry. So he might be able to play a little bit more aggressively in the under area. So that I think that could lead to him being a little bit more productive in terms of interceptions and getting in the, basically being able to jump on passes and use his length, his size to his advantage to break up passes. I do think there's a case to be made for that. But age is undefeated, Eric. I mean, we got to see. I don't want to bury Bradbury because he was one of my favorite players for a while. I was happy when the Eagles signed him. I love the way that he played in 22. I was really disappointed with his 23 season. He got exposed a little bit. So I'm hoping we get a bounce back, but it's also the possibility he won't be on the roster. So we'll have to see. Chop Robinson is intriguing pick too, but he feels like a high ceiling, low floor guy with how raw he is, also being only 6'2". That's BG size. I want an impact player with our 3 basically top 50 picks. Does Quez stay as wide receiver 3, or do they add someone over him? I mean, I don't know if they're going to bring Quez back, Philly 0024, but I mean, I would personally like to see somebody who's better at manipulating space. The vertical stuff is all nice, but I mean, we got enough guys on the roster who can get vertical. I mean, I would like to see somebody who can just play in space and operate the space that AJ and Devontae create. But I mean, I don't know what they're going to do there. Yeah, you like Byron Murphy, Antonio? Oh, you were trying to tell. Yeah, I was asking earlier if it was Murphy. Yeah. I like Guyton if he falls, but yeah. What about the defensive tackle from Illinois, Johnny Newton? Haven't had a chance to really get into depth with him, Antonio. So that's going to be next week's video live stream. We're going to talk about like the interior defensive lineman. So I'm going to definitely jump into that one a little bit. So yeah, he's definitely on the radar for watching some film this weekend. You think Terry and Arnold is a better cornerback than Kool-Aid? Nate Wiggins is Emmanuel Forbes, and he's too small for the league. If we draft a cornerback, Mitchell, yeah, I like Mitchell a lot unspoken. I hope they can get up there, but I think he's going before we pick probably. But Howie, man, he's not just going to sit back if he likes a player. Finally left my SLs. I've been telling people that Dejan is a better safety than corner. That's what I think too, Cameron. Great show, good information, and very informative. Thank you. Hey, I appreciate you tuning in, Stephen. What do you think? What do you think we do with Bradbury? Excellent question, Dwayne. That's an excellent question, man. I don't know, man. They backed him up at the end of the season press conference, but words mean nothing. Actions mean a lot more than words. You know what I mean, Dwayne? I think that's a guy you got to watch what they do in the draft. Now, I think if they can get a Patrick Surtain, they're going to take a Patrick Surtain. If Surtain becomes available, they're going to take a Surtain and not feel bad about it. They'll be just fine. They'll move on from, Bradbury and be perfectly fine. They're not going to lose any sleep over that. I think where it gets interesting is if you can't get a guy in the first round and you have another guy that you're trying to develop, you got Bradbury with this contract. Like, I definitely think it's a zero-sum game because I highly doubt these dudes are back in 25. So it's probably the last hoorah, even if they're here. It's going to be interesting, guys. What do you think Devontae gets? Feel like he would really extend him before a guy like Teagan's gets paid? It's going to be probably in the 100 mil range. Brunson gets me hyped. LB. Yeah, LB's funny, man. How much cap we got left? The last estimate that I saw, Iron Mike, was around 30-some million. But I think it's tricky because technically only the Eagles really know. The estimates are normally pretty good. Over the cap and Spotrac, they do a pretty good job of estimating it. But to be honest with you, the only people who truly know are the Eagles front office, and then that gets turned into the league, and then the league does a somewhat check. I don't buy that the league checks that closely. I think they just looked at there's no crazy mathematics going on here. Like they're like, yo, that doesn't. What kind of mathematical gymnastics are we doing over here? Like, I think that's all they look for. I don't think it's, I think it's heavily dependent upon the teams and what they show. He's a good answer. Bradbury can't run anymore. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to get this thing to work here. Wouldn't mind Hunter Renfrow as a wide receiver 3. Love Saquon, but he's got a lot of miles, no pun intended, on him. I can see us going for a wide receiver that can replace AJ in the future in day 2, considering how expensive wide receivers have become. Look at the Ridley contract. Yeah, that was, yeah, almost 100 mil. They basically ended up paying the AJ contract just a couple of years later. Everyone's sleeping on Isaiah Rodgers. Curious to see how he pans out. Yeah, I mean, first step is they got to get him off the exempt list, which probably will happen pretty soon. Feel like this is a make or break year for Nakobe Dean. I probably would agree with that, Philly 0024. I like Nakobe Dean, but I mean, I think you'd be arguing against the facts if you say it's not. You know what I mean? Like, even if you like him, you have to admit, like, he's got to be on the field and he's got to show that he can be that key piece. Like, or else he's on the last year of a rookie deal and we don't know that much. I mean, that'd be problematic after this year. Do you think we add another running back? I would love Blake Corum in the mid to late rounds. I do, Glizzy, we were talking about that earlier. I do think I wouldn't have thought that earlier. Like, if you had asked me before I really thought about it, I'm like, no, I mean, they signed Barkley. But then I was like, well, you know what? Kenny Gainwell's on the last year of a contract, a rookie deal. They got the young man they signed from the 49ers, who, when I looked into his film a little bit, former third-round pick, I think he's more of a third down back. Pretty decent in pass protection. He don't have a lot of film in terms of catching the ball, to be honest with you. I didn't see a lot on his film there, but I mean, can run between the tackles, pretty good pace and rhythm to how he runs, setting up, allowing the blocks to set up. Pretty good in pass pro. Don't know about him as a receiving back. But after that, guys, we're kind of getting into the woods here in terms of like what's on the roster. Like it's a lot of unknown. So, I mean, I don't think it's as crazy as I would have probably thought if you asked me that a day or two ago. Now I'm kind of like, yeah, I mean, they're going to want something that they can secure for a little while. They're going to definitely want, some kind of answer for the next 3 or 4 years. I feel Hurts would be better with 2 tight ends, not 3 receivers. Draft a big inline blocking receiving threat to pair with Goddard. Make it easier on Hurts. I mean, there's strategies to everything. I mean, you're talking about chipping and committing to like 7-man protections or a 6-man protection with a chip. I just think you simplify it personally, Marcus. I mean, I coached quarterbacks for a long time. I played it in high school. It's just my preference, but my preference is when you get an overloaded blitz, you replace the defender with the football. Now, you can always say, like, Gate, they don't have to overload with a blitz. I mean, they can come through the A and B gap on you. Like, they can mix it up and make you think they're going to overload and drop. Like, you do have to have some answers here and there. I agree, but I just think that what I've seen from the Eagles the last couple of years in particular, last 2 years in particular, is a real lack of accountability for having like optioned hot routes that make sense versus the pressure we're receiving. I think that's where I expect Kellen Moore to be better. Bradbury has a new low cap hit if he gets cut this year, but a big one in 2025 if he does. Stat, he will play over Ringo and Rodgers. He's a major reliability. Start. But if he does stay, I think he meant stay there. Sorry, man. I'm trying to read it and make sense of it easy. I think he meant stay. We should draft a bruiser back, a Braylon Allen from Wisconsin. Said Wisconsin weird there. I still think Ben Vansumeran has some high upside too. athletically gifted. Draft wide receiver 3, to be honest, I think Joseph Ngata may have similar skill set to A.J. Brown. When I looked at Joseph Ngata, what he reminded me of was more Alshon. And I said this when I reviewed his tape, guys, and I stand by this, okay? People crap on Alshon, but they forget how good Alshon was before the leg stuff caught up to him. When the lower body gave out on Alshon, he wasn't the same anymore. He couldn't separate the same, but he's never been like a big separation guy. He just had really strong hands, and he could position his body. That's what I see from Ngata, a guy that's got really strong hands, and he's learning those nuances of how you position your body as a guy who's not going to create a ton of separation. He's not going to have that kind of foot speed to create that separation. That's what I see from Ngata. I think that everyone always thinks that like you don't need that guy until you realize you need that freaking guy. So, I mean, that's what I see from him. He's developmental. I was pretty big on him. My guy gave me some major time views on YouTube. So, you know, he's always going to have a place, you know, with me, you know, outside of that, you know, like I think they're very good at the undrafted free agent market. The Eagles are. I think they're really good at that UDFA market. I think that their pro scouting department or the college, whoever's doing this, probably college, to be honest, but whatever part of the department is in charge of that from scouting, those dudes deserve raises. They've done a heck of a job of identifying guys. I think running back in early day 3, Gainwell is pretty mid, and Scott is maybe gone. Need a backup for Saquon. Yeah, I think as you think about it more easy, I'm with you on that a little bit. Like the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? They kind of have a point. Like, yeah, we would really be in a no man's land. Do you think Xavier Worthy would fit in our offense? Whew. That's a great question, man. I think the issue, you got to be careful with speed, guys. And I loathe that, like, people, like when this dude put up that combine number, a lot of people were just absolutely drooling over him. I think you can say that what Xavier Worthy might give you is the ability to play what I was talking about earlier, which is the ability to not necessarily just get deep, which he does have that ability to be a vertical stretch player, but is the ability to play in space, right? To take advantage of the space that gets operated on and be elusive, be tough to deal with, especially with AJ and Devontae, and, you know, them have to really pay attention to Saquon even. Like, it's easy to lose track of a guy like that, right? Dallas Goedert. Like, you can lose track of an athletically gifted guy like Xavier Worthy. We have to see Kellen Moore, man. You know, Dwayne, I have to see Kellen Moore in his offense, but I like shifty, fast guys personally in terms of that slot role. Is Worthy only a burner, or can he become more than that if we get it? That's what I'm asking. If you can use that athletic ability for him to be a guy that can take a drag route or something like that, you know what I mean? Easy with these guys being put into complex situations with, you know, AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert and Saquon. And if he can use that athleticism to really take advantage of the spacing on the field, I'm interested. But I don't know the answer to that easy. I don't. Do you have any concerns with Juergens filling in at center this season? Also, would that mean Steen fills in at right guard? I think that's their plan, Philly 0024, is that Steen would fill in at right guard, Juergens would fill in at center, but they brought in competition, right? I mean, they got a couple of guys I think intrigue me on the Eagles in terms of competition-wise. So what I like to look at in terms of like Kennard being a tackle guard type on the right side, he could be a right tackle, right guard. You can maybe use him as a competition at right guard. Big physical guy. A dude that once upon a time, a lot of people were pretty excited for his NFL career. Didn't work out for him in Kansas City. They also just brought in, I'm trying to think of that guy's name from Atlanta. He was a center in Atlanta, but they brought him in as being just an interior offensive lineman, someone that could push the guard and give you some of that, you know, ability to be kind of a center guard, you know, trade-off there, if you will, being able to play both roles if you need them to. I'm trying to think of his name. They have Jason Poe, but that's what I'm talking about. It's not Jason Poe. What is that young man's name? You guys are probably already saying it inside of the comment section, but if you remember his name from Atlanta, the young man we just signed, I can't think of his name, guys, and I'm trying to look through the Eagles site. I don't see it, but you guys know what I'm talking about. He's the young kid they just signed. Had a couple of ACL injuries, so that would be the issue there. you're going to be concerned about is, Matt Hennessy. Thank you, Cameron. Matt Hennessy. Like, he could be competition for right guard as well and provide that backup assurance there. But you got a guy that didn't pan out in Kansas City and Kennard. We got a guy in Tyler Steen who's a converted tackle trying to move into guard, right? And then you got Matt Hennessy, who has had complex injury history, but was once upon a time a fairly promising player himself. So, I mean, I don't know that there's a clear-cut answer to that, Philly, of who it is. I think that they want Steen to win the job, but they clearly have brought in some, creative ways of challenging it, and I wouldn't be shocked to see it further challenged through the draft as well. So, I mean, I think your hunch is correct in terms of the alignments, but I don't know. I don't know if Steen's going to lock it down per se. My concerns, if I had concerns about Jurgens, is not physical. I think he's a physically gifted guy, especially for a center. It's more so the processing. You have to set your alignments, right? He's got to really pay attention to the blocking schemes and pressure packages. He's a guy that, either your quarterback or your center, or normally the guys are going to set your protections. They're going to slide your line. They're going to do those things. Traditionally here, it's mostly been the centers. I don't know. I can't answer if Cam Jurgens is ready for that. We don't know until he's on the field and we see it. It's tough, man. Jason Kelsey's not easy to replace. Yeah, Xavier Legette, what's your thoughts, and would he be a good fit? I think if you're looking for that play, that long-term play, in terms of like down the road, we're going to need a legit number 2, then I think some people are envisioning him as being a guy that could potentially do that later on. South Carolina is always a little intriguing here. Big frame guy, 6'2-ish, 6'3-ish, right? Somewhere in that area, guys. We're trying to see exactly what he measured in at the combine. Let me see what his exact measurements were, but he gives you that size protection. We remember what this roster was like without size protection on the outside. Before A.J. Brown, and we had a true guy that could play the boundary, could be that boundary side receiver. Come on, man. We all remember that. That was terrible. Like, I don't ever want to go back to those days. Those days stunk bad. Let me see. NFL.com might have his numbers up here for what his exact measurements were. So he came in at 6'1", 221, 31 to 7/8 inch arm reach, 9-inch hands. Did he do any of the athletic testing? 4.39 40, it's crazy time. 1.54 10 split, 40-inch vertical, 10'6", 126-inch broad jump. Yeah, I mean, I think if you get to the point earlier where EZ was saying, Drew, about potentially trying to replace A.J. Brown later on through the draft, you're not talking about an immediate need. You're not immediately replacing A.J. But, I mean, you could make that case for sure. For sure, you can make that case, man. I will say that I've seen I'm trying to get a feel. Some people think like the South Carolina connection to 220 pounds, is 6'1". I've seen people try to say that this is a, this is going to be like a Deebo Samuel. I don't know that I feel he's a Deebo yet. I got to see that. I got to really see his film a little bit more, Drew, before I project a Deebo. That's not the vibe I got off him the first time. I got more of an A.J. Brown vibe than I got a Deebo vibe off of him. But, both of them play physical. I get if you're just saying people that are saying Deebo Samuels because of the physical play with South Carolina, I see it. But I do think Deebo is highly predicated upon yak in very short route developments. So I really need to dig deep into Xavier's film to see if that's what I see there. So I'm a little careful with that one, Drew, because I've seen some reports out there like that. Worthy would not see targets. I think Ricky Pearsall, Florida, is a realistic target as a wide receiver 3 for day 3. I like when Christopher, I'm kind of with you. I'm a fan of the day 3 picks personally. I think in the scouting world, that's where the best work gets done. That's where you're really showing your worth. I think most top 10 players, anyone can kind of pick them out. But I think when you get to the Jason Kelce's, when you get to those type of guys, right? Those really, the TJ Edwards, who was an undrafted free agent, pulling those dudes out. That's where you're really proving yourself as a scout, in my opinion. Matt Hennessy, thank you guys. See BB as an option at right guard. South Carolina Birds fans, maybe. I mean, I think they're trying to shore it up. We'll have to see the full extent of it, guys. We'll have to see what they go into camp right now. It's hard to say. I think they definitely are aware of the fact that they want it to be Steen, but they can't just depend upon it. Like, he's got to earn it. Temple guy, I think. Yeah, he's definitely played a Temple, guys. Hennessy. Thank you, guys. Yeah. I was like, it was driving me crazy. I knew his name. I'm like, bro, why am I can't think of his name right now. Would still like if they can somehow get Justin Simmons, especially with Fangio's scheme. Not huge on Reed Blankenship, especially as a deep guy. As a free Philly 0024. I like Reed in a role of. Reed is a really good backup player, and I think he's got some starting potential, and I think he can play free. But I do agree with your assessment that he might be better suited to play as a strong side. The other thing that kind of worries me about Reed Blankenship is we talk about CJ GJ and the injuries. Reed worries me too, man. He got a history of that in college, and he got a little beat up last year too. I do think that Reed's better than what, like we did our work, man. That was a heck of a UDFA signing. But, yeah, I mean, upgrades are upgrades, Philly. I mean, if you can make an upgrade at a position, as much as I like Reed Blankenship, like I'm going to make the upgrade. South Carolina Birds fans say, hey, I'm a Gamecock fan here. Debo was a different animal in college. Yeah, I saw a couple people that were saying that, SC Birds fan. But like I said, my initial watching, I saw more A.J. Brown than I saw Debo. But I guess if you're just talking about physicality and the ability to get yak, I think his route tree, I thought his route tree looked different from Debo's, but I was willing to go back and take another look. I was like, well, maybe I could have just maybe looked at a few games that maybe gave me a feeling one way or another, and maybe I didn't give him a full enough grasp yet. So I like the player a lot, actually. I think he's actually a decent player. Keon Coleman looks like a great yak guy. Late picks and UDFAs also depend on coaching. Would Kelsey be the player he was without Stoutland? Yeah, and Howard Mudd, easy. He had two really great offensive line coaches coming in the league. From Howard Mudd to Stoutland, man, he was very fortunate. Aaron Donald just retired. Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's crazy, man. Cooper Beebe is good. Stoutland would get the best out of him. So you guys are thinking in terms of like, yeah, I mean, I like the kid from Duke too, from the draft. I can't think of his name. Some people have him as a tackle. I think he's going to end up being a little bit more Kansas State, Cooper Beebe. I'm going to take a look at Cooper Beebe, man. You guys got me interested now. Give me 1 second, guys. Guard, Kansas State. All right. I'm going to take a look at him. I haven't had a chance to really see his film yet. But the kid from Duke is what I was going on to. That young man, I've had a chance because, I'm in ACC territory, guys. So that's pretty much all to get shown here. Graham Barton. That young man has played all over the line, to be honest, at Duke. Some people got him as a center. I think he's going to be a guard in the league. There are some teams that are still say that he could be a tackle. I think he's a little shorter in the arm reach. I mean, you can get away with being shorter in the arm reach at the guard position if you have crazy grip strength. I think it's a little harder to get away with that on the edges. I think it's a little harder because I think it is predicated on you being able to keep your balance and being able to keep a guy at a distance a little bit. So I have him projected as a guard personally. He has interest to me, but I haven't had a chance to take a look yet at Cooper Beebe. I'm going to take a look. Sorry, guys. I don't like if I'm really not that familiar with him, I don't want to, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to use a highlight clip, some highlights I saw of the guy and say that, you know what I mean? Like, I like to see the full games and just get a feel for exactly how he's being used within a system. Spencer Rattler, target for backup quarterback. They could go to the draft route, Daryl. I don't know if it's going to be Spencer Rattler. I can't say. I don't know. The odds of the guys that they're Tyler Huntley compared to Joe Flacco are so different as backup quarterbacks. And those are the two guys I've heard linked so far. But they just had, last year they had a guy that's not really a normal, quarterback in terms of what you would look for, for the Eagles. So, he was a movement-based guy. I like the young kid they have on the roster. They just seem like they're going to make him earn it if he's going to get it. Yeah, first ballot Hall of Famer. He's a good player, man. I can't believe he retired, man. Legette is more of a scalpel. Debo is a hammer. Cody Barton. Yeah, thank you guys. Yeah, Cody Barton. Yeah, he's a good player. I like Cody Barton. I think he's an interesting prospect. I don't know that he's going to be there where we pick in the second round, but if he was around that pick 50 or 53, I don't hate that player, especially because that's a guy that could step in right away and play. Occam's razor. Apparently, we got the Gamecock fans in here, huh? All y'all need is Caleb. Caleb played at Charleston Southern, but he normally gives me the intel and all the South Carolina players. He played against Debo in high school. Realistically, I feel our first round pick should have meaningful snaps. I like the idea of Chop Robinson or another defensive tackle or cornerback. We did Nolan Smith dirty last year, and he should have played more. Yeah, I agree. I think even Howie kind of admitted that, Christopher, that they didn't utilize him correctly. I think we were overrating C.J. Gardner-Johnson a bit. He's terrible in run game tackling, and some of his picks were tip passes. He would do better as a nickel. I think they potentially could use him as a hybrid player, easy. I don't know the answer at nickel yet. We kind of talked about that earlier. I hope I didn't mute myself during that portion, but I don't know that we have the answer yet at nickel. We got some guys that could probably do it. CJ has been a nickel before, but we'll see. The Oregon Center, JPJ, my bad, man. Looks like a sure thing too. Also, Zach Zenter from Michigan. Jalen and Hurts had a good relationship at Oklahoma. Showing my bias, Rattler is that dude. It's all good, man. I do it all the time. What's up, Philly Insider? How you doing, buddy? How about Edge Cooper at 22? I like Edgerrin Cooper a lot. I was actually showing film of him early on in this live stream. Extrice, if you want to go back, it's like that first 20 minutes where I normally do my like little soliloquy in here. I went over and I kind of talked about Zack Baun. I talked about the Kaiser White role. We talked about Van Ginkel. And I talked about how Edgerrin Cooper, when I looked at his film, I went, wow, he's more versatile than I thought. I don't know if the Eagles would make that pick at 22, but I would not be mad by it. I think it's a big enough need to get a playmaker in here that I would be willing. I would not complain about it. I just don't know that I feel confident the Eagles would do it, but I would be pretty happy with the pick personally. Any chance Sweat and Reddick both go? I mean, yeah, there's definitely a chance. Negotiations could easily break down with Reddick, and you're stuck in a situation where you can't resign him. So what do you do? You know what I mean? Or do you move on? I mean, yeah, it could break down at any point. I got in here late. Devin White concerns me versus the run. Howie's kryptonite is the linebacker spot. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit about Occam's razor. We talked a little bit about how I think they're trying to structure this and why I think Devin White's better suited to play the will and not that Mike role. I think Nakobe needs to be your Mike or whoever you bring in if you bring in another guy. But yes, I agree with you that he had very bad pursuit angles. So that's why I'm a little off with him being the Mike. Those pursuit angles, I don't think it was a lack of effort. I don't think it's a lack of physicality with Devin White in the run game. I just think that he gets out of position from his pursuit angles and tries to make a lot of arm tackles. I mean, does Fangio prefer a one gap or a two gap scheme up front because our three linemen would be better served as one gappers? It's down based. From what I saw a little bit, Wicked Hebrew, it was down based. I think early down plays, it's not uncommon to see some two gap stuff there from the interior defensive line. But I would say that he probably does qualify a little bit more as a gap or gap and a half. I think is more so where you'd fall into instead of a natural two gap. Yeah, I saw the post, guys. I don't know if he said he was leaving Philly, but yeah, it kind of like indicated that he would be. But now we're a couple days past it and he's still here, CJ. So I don't know what to think. I don't think that the issues are like can't be reconciled. But to be fair, CJ, we're not there, so we don't know we don't know what happened in the locker room, right? I mean, I heard reports that he was freelancing, CJ, and that's what ticked him off. Not his lack of production, but he started freelancing towards the end of the season, is what they were saying in terms of his pass rush and stuff. And that's why our guys were out of position in the run game. But I know that Josh Sweat can actually be effective. He's a good player. It's not like this dude's a complete bum. It's a tough situation, man. Homegrown talent. We took this guy from being a dude that they didn't think would ever have an NFL career because of his knee to, he was a raw, prospect, a raw talent that we home grew him. I mean, it's hard to see that type of guy walk out the door, but I do think that the reports are legit. They would only do that if they believe Cooper can be an edge linebacker hybrid. Yeah, that's my feeling too easy. But yeah, I mean, if they did make that move, I wouldn't complain. I like him a lot. I think he's a good player. If how he did that, he really changes his philosophy, or Fangio really likes him. Both fair points. Nakobe is a natural will. He played badly as a Mike last year in coverage. I don't think it was so easy. My perspective is he wasn't as bad in coverage as people think. I think the scheme was just really soft underneath. I think if you go back and you really watch a lot of the tape, I mean, there's a couple times he got caught in traffic. He legitimately got caught up in traffic and didn't work through traffic the right way. I think that's just somewhat inexperience on that part. But a lot of it was that they were really forgiving on the underneath stuff. And those guys were really just playing cleanup after they caught the ball. They weren't really there to impact it. And the only guy who really ever seemed to have an impact in the passing game in terms of coverage was, the pure length and range that, Cunningham could play with, Zach Cunningham, just because he had such long arms that he could be kind of disruptive there. I think that zone was just a little too passive personally. Doesn't mean that Nakobe is that guy. He still has to prove it. But I do think that some changes to how soft that coverage is might shed a little different light there. TJ was the perfect Mike, homegrown too. Definitely missed him a lot. What I like about Huff is he's a great pressure numbers against elite tackles, something both Reddick and Sweat have struggled with. With Carter being doubled every play, he will be great. Yeah, I saw a lot of people saying that the biggest reason he was brought here was for third down pressure. But yeah. But didn't coaches play them soft since they didn't trust them in coverage? It's a little bit of the chicken and the egg there. Easy. Well, not really chicken and egg, but you can make the claim both ways there. I don't know. Normally when you do that, that's more so concerned on the outside than with your linebackers. I just think that I don't think that there was a solid grip on the scheme. Okay. I think that I don't want to bury this guy because I actually thought he was a decent guy. But I don't think that his scheme, I don't think he did a good job assembling the scheme. Easy. I would like to see Nakobe with a more opportunity to play a little tighter in those zones. Illinois tight end, Tip Riemann, kettle-like weapon that would enhance the physicality and versatility of the Eagles and 21 personnel. Howie can generate about $16.2 million in cap saves just by cutting Bradbury and Sweat, which might take place after the draft. Any concerns about the tampering investigation? I mean, concern in the fact that it got, the allegations were made, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot there to it. I mean, Barkley said that that's not correct. It's like a second, third party source. I don't know how they can really, you know what I'm saying, Philly? I don't know how you go forward with that. I don't see what you could prove unless there's some kind of, did Barkley text Franklin something? I mean, there has to be some kind of tangible proof. How was Dean in college with coverage? He was actually decent. He was decent in college in terms of his coverage ability, but it's different systems, different schemes, a lot of spread concepts. So you're spot dropping, and if you played enough spread teams, you kind of know where to be in terms of that drop. Easy. So I don't know that it's 100% transferable because when you're in the league, especially if you move him, see, here's the problem. If you move him to Will Easy, he's going to be playing that Kaiser White role. That Kaiser White role is where you might have to match and carry with a slot or a really gifted tight end. Someone who's, really gifted at getting to the top of the route stem and then having that option-based routes to kind of shake you a little bit. If you remember early on with Kaiser White in 22 season where he got locked up one-on-one with CeeDee Lamb. I mean, he's matching and carrying. It's not really truly one-on-one. He's just matching and carrying and delivering him to another zone. But if it's within a 5 to 7 yard radius, him being a former safety, he showed you he can make a play on the ball. He broke the ball up on CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, you wouldn't want any linebacker carrying a guy like CeeDee Lamb past like 7 yards. Like, that is a fool's errand. Like, you're going to get absolutely torched if you do that. But you do see more of that in the league, right? You see a lot more of that. We saw Nicholas Morrow doing that last year. So, like, that's where I get a little iffy, where I probably wouldn't put him towards the will because of that. I think that while White is not good in coverage either, at least the athletic profile, I think it's more so with him, it's experience and it's understanding how to actually play in coverage. He's good enough to do it, especially for 5 to 7 yard radius with match carrying and delivering a guy. That's where I get a little iffy on there. But if you're spot dropping to a zone, I think Nakobe's perfectly fine. I just think that zone can't be as soft as it was last year. He's got to get a little better at working through traffic. Easy. Like, there's one play in particular I remember. I don't remember the game it was in, but I remember he ended up running into our nickel and one of the receivers, and it was just a little easy out pass because of that. So we end up gaining like 12, 15 yards because he just didn't work through traffic well. Like, there's some little incidents like that on film to where you can verifiably say he needs to be better at working through the traffic, through the garbage. But, that's young guys. You're going to have some of that here and there. Think NFL recognizes busted up Eagles with the 23 schedule, 3 in a few days, followed by 49ers and boys coming off the rest. Yeah, I think I made a post on Twitter last year where I said about people were talking about conspiracy theories. And I'm like, it's crazy they talk about conspiracy theories, but nobody wants to talk about the fact that the Eagles have this crazy schedule with no rest. And then you got Dallas and Arlington, Texas, which they haven't won a game there since like 2017, I want to say. And then you had Seattle, which they haven't won since like 2008. Like, it was, I'm like, if you really look at it, one can say that they were trying to purposely create the downfall. Like, we beat Kansas City in Arrowhead in November, which is something that's only happened a couple times with Patrick Mahomes. Like, we're like one of the first teams to do that. You could definitely see that they might have been trying to kind of, you know what I mean? Like, you could I don't think that's truly what happened, but you can make that case. What up, Shonuff? How you doing, buddy? Really hoping Jordan Davis improves his conditioning a lot more this upcoming season. I think you saw his play decrease a lot in the second half of the season, especially with Fletch gone. Yeah, they got to. Well, I mean, I still think there's a possibility they go interior defensive line, either in free agency, post June 1st when even more cap space gets created, or when you can look to the draft. I wouldn't rule it out personally. All right, guys, I appreciate y'all so much. We've been going for 3 hours. We're almost into the old school Battle Birds podcast. We used to go 4 or 5 hours with Philly Mike and Reese and myself, Philly Fresh. So I'm going to jump off of here, guys. I got some things I got to do. But, man, I appreciate y'all. We will be back. I got some stuff in here that I know you guys want me to look into. So I'll make some videos. I'll do some film study on Max Melton. I'll take a look at Brandon Dorless and Cooper Beebe. So I got some names down here to take a look at a few guys. But I appreciate y'all, man. I'll see y'all in next video, guys. Be soon. We'll do a couple live streams this week too.